Hey friends! Glad you're here at Super Harry. We've cooked up something special. What if ancient Gringotts vault scan revealed Harry true heir to Hogwarts and 23 stolen founder artifacts? Liking and subscribing really helps us out. Okay, story time. Chapter 1, The Scan. The letter from Gringotts arrived on a Tuesday, which Harry thought was a deeply unremarkable day for his life to change completely. He was sitting at the Dursleys' kitchen table, eating toast and trying to be invisible, which was something he'd gotten quite good at over 11 years of practice. Vernon was behind his newspaper, muttering about interest rates. Petunia was wiping the counter in long, aggressive strokes that suggested she had opinions about the counter's performance. Dudley was eating cereal with the focused intensity of someone defusing a bomb. The letter came through the mail slot with the ordinary post, which was unusual. Wizard correspondence typically arrived by owl, and it was sealed with a crest Harry didn't immediately recognize, a key above a mountain, stamped in deep bronze wax. He slipped it under the table and opened it quietly. Mr. H. J. Potter, Gringotts Bank of Diagon Alley requires your presence at your earliest convenience regarding irregular activity detected in Vault 687. This is not a request for payment. This is a notification of audit. Please present yourself to the heir's desk upon arrival with identification. Failure to respond within 14 days will result in the bank exercising its right of independent assessment under the Charter of 974. Director Ragnarok Gringotts Wizarding Bank. Harry read it twice. Then he folded it, finished his toast, and went upstairs to write to Ron. Getting to Diagon Alley required navigating the Dursleys, which in summer was its own kind of obstacle course. Vernon's position was, as always, that Harry's world was a problem he hadn't asked for and didn't intend to engage with. Petunia's position was slightly more complicated. She knew enough about the wizarding world to be frightened of it in the way you're frightened of a neighbor's dog that's never bitten you but has the eyes for it. Harry told them he needed to go to his bank. He said it the way you say something you've already decided, not the way you ask. Vernon's face went through its usual weather system, red, then redder, then the specific purple that meant he was calculating whether this was worth the fight. He looked at Harry across the kitchen, and something in Harry's expression must have communicated that it wasn't, because Vernon snapped his newspaper flat and said, "Back by dinner." Harry said, "Sure," which was technically not a lie, just an agreement with no enforcement mechanism. The night bus dropped him at the Leaky Cauldron at 10:30, and he walked through to Diagon Alley in the late morning bustle with his hands in his pockets and the Gringotts letter folded in his back pocket. The alley was alive with summer traffic, families with Hogwarts lists, witches comparing broomstick models in the window of quality Quidditch supplies, a pair of wizards arguing about something in front of Flourish and Blots with the passion of people who'd been arguing about it for years. Hermione was waiting for him outside Gringotts, which didn't surprise him. He'd mentioned the letter in his note to Ron. Ron had told Hermione, and Hermione had sent a 3-page letter by return owl that covered Gringotts' audit procedures, the Charter of 974, which she'd already looked up, and 7 reasons why he absolutely shouldn't go alone. Ron was there too, hands in his pockets, slightly out of breath. "You're 2 minutes late," Hermione said. "The night bus stopped for a man with a goat," Harry said. "That's not a real excuse." "It absolutely is." He looked at both of them, Ron's easy grin, Hermione's expression that was trying to be stern and mostly succeeding. "You didn't have to come." "Obviously we came," Ron said. "A letter from Gringotts about your vault sounds like the beginning of something that goes extremely wrong or extremely interesting, and either way I want to be there." Hermione had already pulled out a small notebook. The Charter of 974 is the original banking compact between the Goblin clans and the Wizarding Wizengamot. It gives Gringotts extraordinary independent authority over financial and hereditary disputes. The heir's desk specifically handles, "Let's just go in," Harry said. "I was getting to that." "I know. Let's go in anyway." Gringotts in summer had a different quality to it than Gringotts at the start of term, fewer families, more business, the kind of quiet that wasn't peaceful so much as focused. The goblins at the high counters worked with the same clipped efficiency as always, but Harry noticed, as he approached the nearest desk, that several of them looked up. Not the way people look up when someone walks by. The way they look up when something they've been waiting for has finally arrived. The goblin at the heir's desk was older than any goblin Harry had seen before, his face was a landscape of deep lines, his fingers long and deliberate, and he wore a chain of bronze links that looked like it carried some significance Harry didn't know how to read. He looked at Harry the way a jeweler looks at a stone brought in for appraisal, with complete, unhurried attention. "Harry James Potter," the goblin said. "Not a question." "That's me," Harry said. "Identification." Harry held out his hand, and the goblin produced a small obsidian disc and pressed it to Harry's palm. It glowed, briefly, with a faint amber light, then went dark. The goblin studied it for a moment, made a note in a ledger, and said, "Follow me." Ron made a low noise that was approximately interesting. Hermione had her notebook open. The room they were taken to was deep inside the bank, accessible through a door Harry had never noticed before, set into the stone wall behind the main hall, sealed with a lock that the goblin opened with a touch rather than a key. The corridor beyond was narrower than the main halls, the walls hewn rock rather than polished marble, and the light came from torches that burned a steady, smokeless gold. The room itself was circular. The floor was engraved with geometric patterns that reminded Harry vaguely of the ceiling in the Great Hall, something old, deliberate, and meant. In the center stood a stone basin, roughly waist-height, its interior dark and still. 3 other goblins were already in the room, standing at intervals around the basin's edge, and they all had the same quality of waiting that the desk goblin had, the focused patience of people at the end of a very long countdown. Director Ragnarok was standing at the far side of the basin. Harry knew it was him immediately, the way you know certain things without being told, something in the way he occupied the room, the way the other goblins angled slightly toward him without appearing to. He was shorter than Harry, like all goblins, but the height difference felt entirely irrelevant. He had dark eyes that were doing something more than looking, and he regarded Harry's entrance with an expression that might have been satisfaction. "Mr. Potter," he said. "Thank you for coming promptly." "Your letter said 14 days, Harry said. "I came in 4. "Yes." Something moved at the edge of Ragnarok's expression. "Please, stand at the basin." Harry glanced at Hermione. She gave him the smallest nod, which meant "I've assessed the situation and I don't think you're in immediate danger but I'm watching everything." He stepped forward to the basin's edge. "What is this?" he asked. "An ancient heritage scan," Ragnarok said. "It is older than your school, older than your ministry, older than most of what your kind considers history. We do not use it lightly. We have not used it in this bank in 112 years. He paused. "We detected an irregularity in your vault. Not a financial irregularity. A resonance. Something in your vault is vibrating at a frequency that corresponds to our deepest records, records that precede the founding of Gringotts itself. We required confirmation before we could tell you what we suspected. And the scan gives you that confirmation," Hermione said from behind Harry. Ragnarok looked at her with the particular expression goblins reserve for humans who ask accurate questions. "It does. With your permission, Mr. Potter, you will place your hand in the basin. A small amount of blood will be drawn, not by us, by the basin itself. It is old magic. It does not lie." "What do you suspect?" Harry asked. Ragnarok held his gaze. "I would prefer the scan to speak first." Harry looked at the basin. The stone was smooth and dark, and the interior held something that wasn't quite water, it had too much depth to it, and occasionally, if he looked at it sideways, he thought he could see light moving somewhere far below the surface, like bioluminescence in a very deep ocean. He put his hand in. The cold was immediate, not unpleasant, just total, the way cold water takes all your attention at once. Then something pricked his index finger, a sharp, clean point of sensation, and he felt rather than saw a drop of blood fall into the stillness below his palm. For 2 seconds, nothing happened. Then the basin lit up. Not like a lamp. Like something waking up, a deep, spreading luminescence that came from every carved line in the floor simultaneously, racing outward from the basin in geometric waves, and the light was not one color but four, distinct and layered, a deep red gold at the base, a rich blue above it, then bronze, then silver. They pulsed together in a rhythm that felt, absurdly, like a heartbeat, and the sound that accompanied it was below hearing rather than above it, more vibration than noise, something that Harry felt in his sternum and behind his eyes. The goblins around the basin were absolutely still. Ragnar's expression had moved past satisfaction into something Harry couldn't name. Reverence, maybe. Or the specific emotional state of someone watching a prediction come true after a very long time. Well, Ron said, very quietly, from the doorway, that seems significant. The light held for a full 30 seconds, then settled into a steady, low glow that didn't fade. The geometric patterns on the floor remained illuminated, all four colors, all four layers, pulsing gently like a sleeping breath. Harry withdrew his hand from the basin. His finger had a small cut that was already closing. He looked at Ragnar. "Tell me," he said. Ragnar crossed to a stone table Harry hadn't noticed at the edge of the room and opened a ledger that appeared to be made of something that was not quite paper. The pages had a slight luminescence of their own, and the text on them, when Ragnar turned it so Harry could see, appeared to be in a language that should have been unreadable but that Harry found, with a slight disorientation, he could understand. Not in the way he understood English, more like the way you understand something in a dream, where the meaning arrives complete without the mechanism of translation. The four lights, Ragnar said, correspond to the four founders of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Godric Gryffindor. Helga Hufflepuff. Rowena Ravenclaw. Salazar Slytherin. He let that land. The scan reveals that you carry the direct blood inheritance of all four bloodlines, converged in a single heir. This has not occurred in recorded history. The founders, despite their collaboration in building the school, were careful, deliberately careful, to keep their bloodlines separate. Several historians have speculated this was intentional, a safeguard against the concentration of hereditary magical authority. He paused. They failed, apparently. Or something intervened over generations that was not anticipated. The room was very quiet. "All four," Hermione said. Her voice had that particular quality it got when she was encountering something so far outside her existing framework that she was rebuilding from scratch in real time. "He's the heir of all four. The direct convergent heir," Ragnar said. "Every other living person with founder's blood carries a fragment, a single line, diluted over centuries. Mr. Potter carries all four, fully expressed." He looked at Harry. The four colors of the scan correspond exactly to Gryffindor's crimson, Ravenclaw's blue, Hufflepuff's bronze, and Slytherin's silver. All four lines reached full luminescence. There is no ambiguity. Harry was quiet for a moment. He was aware of something happening inside him that wasn't shock exactly, more like recognition, the kind of feeling where something you've half known without knowing you knew it suddenly has a name. He thought about the Sorting Hat spending so long on his head first year, the way the castle sometimes felt less like a place he was visiting and more like a place that knew him. "You said there was a resonance in my vault," Harry said. "What triggered the scan?" Ragnar's expression shifted. He turned the ledger to a new page, and this one was not in the old language, it was written in precise, modern English, in a hand that suggested it had been prepared specifically for this meeting. "This," Ragnar said, "is the reason we called you here." The ledger page was titled, in plain text, Heritage Inventory, Hogwarts Founders, Outstanding Artifacts, Status Unknown. Below the title was a numbered list. Harry counted without meaning to. 23 items. He read the first 5. 1. Gryffindor's War Gauntlet, forged 987 AD, last recorded Gringotts location, Vault 687. Current status, absent. 2. Ravenclaw's Astronomical Lens, forged 991 AD, last recorded Gringotts location, Vault 687. Current status, absent. 3. Hufflepuff Seed Stone, forged 989 AD, last recorded Gringotts location, Vault 687. Current status, absent. 4. Slytherin's Serpent Compass, forged 993 AD, last recorded Gringotts location, Vault 687. Current status, absent. 5. Gryffindor's Compass of True North, forged 1001 AD, last recorded location, Hogwarts Castle, Chamber of Administration. Current status, absent. Harry looked up. These were in my vault. Vault 687 is the Potter family vault, Ragnarok said. It has been sealed to new visitors for 40 years. When our monitoring system flagged the resonance, a consequence of your status as convergent heir activating certain dormant enchantments within the vault, we performed a review of the vault's registered contents against its current contents. A beat. 23 artifacts are missing. They were removed from the vault at various points over the last century, some through direct withdrawal by individuals with vault access, some through channels that are. He paused in a way that suggested deliberate understatement. Less legitimate. Stolen, Harry said. Removed without the heir's consent, Ragnarok said, which was Goblin for yes, stolen, and we are choosing our legal language carefully. Hermione had moved to Harry's side and was reading the ledger rapidly, her finger tracing lines of text. Some of these have known locations, she said. Look, items 7, 12, and 15 have location notations. Hogwarts Castle, restricted. That means they're still in the school. 3 of the 23 are currently inside Hogwarts, Ragnarok confirmed. We know this because the resonance that alerted us is directional. We can identify approximate locations for 11 of the 23. The remaining 12 have been shielded from our detection, by magic sophisticated enough that we have been unable to penetrate it. Who has them? Harry said. His voice was level. Ragnarok held his gaze. We have suspicions. We do not yet have certainties. What we have certainty about is your legal position. He closed the ledger and placed his long fingers flat on its cover. As the confirmed convergent heir of all 4 founders, you hold hereditary ownership of these artifacts under Goblin law, under the Charter of 974, and under the older compact that predates both. You have the right to demand their return. You have the right to pursue their recovery by any legal means. And you have the right to know who took them. A pause. Gringotts will assist you. This is not generosity, it is obligation. These artifacts should never have left our protection. We failed in that duty. We intend to correct it. Harry looked at the ledger, then at the 4-colored light still pulsing gently across the stone floor, then at Ragnarok. How long have you known this was possible? Harry asked. That I might be the convergent heir. A long pause. Long enough to be its own kind of answer. Certain records suggested the possibility, Ragnarok said carefully. Records old enough that we did not consider them reliable until the resonance made the question urgent. That's not what I asked. Another pause. The Goblin Nation has been aware of the theoretical possibility of a convergent founder's heir for approximately 30 years. We had no confirmation. We did not know it would be you specifically until today. But you suspected. We observed, Ragnarok said, which was a more honest answer than Harry had expected and a less complete one than he'd hoped for. There are others who observed the same indicators, Mr. Potter. And who drew the same theoretical conclusions. I would advise you to consider carefully who else in your life has been positioned to monitor your development. He met Harry's eyes without blinking. Consider carefully who has had every incentive to keep this discovery from occurring. The room was quiet again. Harry thought about a letter left with the Dursleys. A very specific placement in Gryffindor, after a hat that spent an unusual amount of time deciding. A series of years in which he'd been perpetually managed, guided, protected in ways that kept him useful but never fully informed. Dumbledore, Hermione said softly, not as an accusation, just as the word that fit the space. Harry didn't confirm or deny it. He turned back to Ragnarok. "The 3 artifacts inside Hogwarts," he said. "Where exactly?" "We can give you approximate locations within the castle's wing structure," Ragnarok said. "The specific rooms will require you to be present. As convergent air, the artifacts will respond to your proximity with a warmth you will recognize. They will want to be found." A pause, and something moved in Ragnarok's expression that might, in a human face, have been called wonder. "They have been waiting a long time, Mr. Potter." Harry nodded slowly. Then he straightened, and something in the way he stood in that room, in the soft pulse of 4-colored light, with the knowledge settling into him like something solidifying, was different from how he'd entered it. Not louder. Not more dramatic. Just more certain. "I'll need a copy of the full ledger," he said. "Every artifact, every known location, every suspected holder. And I'll need the legal documentation establishing my heir status, something Gringotts certified, with your seal." "Already being prepared," Ragnarok said, and the faintest edge of satisfaction had returned to his expression. "We anticipated your requests." "I bet you did," Harry said, and it wasn't entirely a compliment, because he was already thinking about the 30 years of observation and what exactly Gringotts had been doing with its suspicions in the meantime. But that was a conversation for another visit. Right now he had what he needed. He picked up the ledger copy a junior goblin produced from a side room and tucked it under his arm. He looked at Ron and Hermione. Ron's expression was the one he wore when he was trying to decide whether something was terrifying or brilliant and had landed temporarily on both. "All 4, he said. "All 4, Harry confirmed. "Right," Ron said. Yeah. Okay." Hermione had her notebook out and was writing at speed. "We need to research the legal precedents for an heir claim. We need to cross-reference the artifact list with Hogwarts history to identify likely locations. We need to understand which of these items have been in private hands long enough to create complicated ownership disputes, and we need to get out of this bank first," Harry said. "Obviously, I was going to say that next." "Were you?" "Possibly after 2 more points, yes." Outside, Diagon Alley felt different. Objectively it was the same shop fronts, same summer crowd, same owls in the windows of Elops, but Harry walked through it with the ledger under his arm and the Gringotts heir certification folded in his pocket and the memory of 4 colors of light pulsing on a stone floor, and the alley felt smaller than it had an hour ago. Not in a bad way. More like the way a room gets smaller when you finally understand its dimensions. They found a quiet corner table at Florian Fortescue's because Hermione said they needed somewhere to think and Ron said he needed ice cream and neither requirement was incompatible with the other. Harry laid the ledger copy on the table. It was 43 pages, which was more than he'd expected, and the first page bore Ragnarok's personal seal, a bronze key over a mountain, the same as the letter, alongside a block of text in both English and gobbledygook that certified, in language precise enough to be weaponized, that Harry James Potter was the confirmed convergent blood heir of Godric Gryffindor, Helga Hufflepuff, Rowena Ravenclaw, and Salazar Slytherin, with all hereditary rights, claims, and authorities pertaining thereto. Hermione read it 3 times. Then she looked up. "Harry," she said carefully. "I know. This is, the legal implications alone, I know. The Wisindamat has a hereditary seat provision for founderline heirs. If you file an heir claim, you'd have standing to, Hermione." He looked at her steadily. "I know. We'll get to all of it. Right now I want to go through the artifact list and work out what's at Hogwarts and where, and I want to understand what we're dealing with before we start making moves." He paused. "But yes. We're going to make moves." Ron was reading the artifact list over Harry's shoulder, ice cream forgotten. "Gryffindor's War Gauntlet," he read. "What does a war gauntlet do?" "Probably something to do with war," Harry said. "Helpful. We'll research them," Hermione said, already pulling a second notebook from her bag. "Cross-reference with Hogwarts, a history, the foundational texts in the restricted section," Harry, as heir you may actually have the right to access restricted materials without a teacher's note. That's something we should add it to the list, Harry said. She wrote it down. Then she looked up at him again, and the efficiency dropped out of her expression for a moment, replaced by something more honest. Are you all right? Harry considered the question seriously. He thought about the basin and the 4 colors of light and Ragnar's careful words about 30 years of observation and people who might have had reason to keep this from occurring. I think I'm more all right than I've been in a while, he said. Which is a weird thing to say about finding out your vault got robbed. 23 times, Ron said. 23 times, Harry agreed. But they're mine. And I know what I'm looking for now. He turned to the first artifact page and spread it flat on the table. Let's start with Hogwarts. 3 artifacts inside the castle, let's figure out which 3 and where they might be. We go back in September, and I want to know exactly what I'm walking toward. Hermione's pen was already moving. Ron took a long spoonful of ice cream and leaned in. Right, he said. So. Hogwarts, 1,000 years of history, and someone's been nicking things from the founder's heir for, how long did Ragnar say? A century, at various points. A century, Ron repeated. And no one noticed. Or someone noticed, Harry said, and decided not to say anything. The table was quiet for a moment. Dumbledore? Ron said. Harry didn't answer right away. He turned to page 7 of the ledger, where the Hogwarts artifacts were listed, and read the location notation again, Hogwarts Castle, restricted. Wing unknown. We'll find out, he said. He spent the rest of the afternoon at Hermione's parents' house, sitting at the kitchen table with the ledger spread between them while Hermione's mum made sandwiches she kept refilling without being asked, which Harry thought was one of the kindest things a person could do for someone processing significant information on an empty stomach. By 5 o'clock they had a working outline. The 23 artifacts broke into 4 categories, those with known locations, 11 total, including the 3 at Hogwarts, those in private magical collections, 6, with partial identification of holders, those on the black market or recently traded, 4, with the most urgent recovery timeline, and those completely unaccounted for, 2, which were either extremely well hidden or no longer in Britain. The private collection items were the most complicated. 3 of them had location notations that pointed, with varying degrees of directness, toward old wizarding family vaults. One name appeared twice in the margin notations, written in the cramped, careful hand of whatever goblin had compiled these records. Malfoy. 3 artifacts in the Malfoy family's possession, Hermione said, tapping the page. And look at this. The notations describe them as having been transferred by gift to the Malfoy family vault, dates ranging from 1903 to 1967. Gifts. From whom? From people who were either deceived about what they were giving away, Harry said, or who knew exactly what they were doing and wanted someone specific to have them. Which implies a chain of knowledge going back 60 years at minimum, Hermione said. Someone knew these were Founder's artifacts. Someone knew who the heir would eventually be. And someone was quietly redistributing them away from the Potter vault while the heir wasn't in a position to stop it. While I was a baby, Harry said. Hermione looked at him. He met her eyes and held them, and the thing in his expression wasn't anger, exactly, anger was too hot for it. It was the colder, more deliberate feeling of someone who has worked out the shape of something and is deciding what to do about it. We're not rushing anything, he said. We do this right. We understand all of it before we move. But we do move. All of it, the Hogwarts artifacts, the Malfoy problem, the black market pieces, we're getting them back. All 23, Ron said from the doorway, where he'd been eating a sandwich. All 23, Harry said. Ron nodded, satisfied. Good. I was worried for a moment you were going to be sensible about this and hold back. When have I ever been sensible? That's exactly why I was worried it might start now. Harry took the night bus home as the sun was going down, the ledger in his bag and the certification in his jacket pocket, pressed flat against his chest. The bus lurched through London in its particular way, stopping for a witch in Edinburgh and a wizard in Bristol and, inexplicably, the same man with the same goat that had delayed him this morning, which Harry was beginning to think was either a coincidence or the universe's idea of a callback. He sat in a seat near the back and watched the city go dark around him and thought about 4 colors of light on a stone floor. About 30 years of goblin observation. About artifacts moved quietly through the shadows of a century, away from a vault that had no air old enough to notice their absence. He thought about September, and 3 artifacts inside Hogwarts, and a headmaster who had known him since before he could walk and had spent 11 years deciding exactly how much Harry needed to know about himself. The bus dropped him at the Dursleys' Road at 9:15. Vernon was watching television and didn't look up. Petunia was in the kitchen. Dudley was on the phone. The house was exactly what it had always been. Harry went up to his room, put the ledger under a loose floorboard beneath Hedwig's cage, and sat on the edge of his bed in the dark for a moment. Then he picked up a piece of parchment and started writing. Not to Ron. Not to Hermione. To Ragnarok. Director Ragnarok, thank you for the meeting. I have reviewed the ledger. I have one question for now, and I would appreciate a direct answer. Of the 12 artifacts that are shielded from Gringotts detection, how many do you believe are shielded by Ministry-grade enchantments? And is there any legitimate reason the Ministry would have an interest in concealing Founder artifacts from their heir? Potter. He tied the parchment to Hedwig's leg, opened the window, and watched her go. Then he lay back on his bed and stared at the ceiling and thought, with the quiet, clear-eyed certainty of someone who had just stopped waiting for things to happen to him, about September. Ragnarok's reply arrived at 6 in the morning, before the Dursleys were awake. It was a single line. For artifacts carry Ministry-grade shielding. You ask the right question, Mr. Potter. Come back to us when you are ready to ask the next one. Harry read it twice. Then he folded it carefully, put it with the ledger under the floorboard, and went down to make breakfast, moving through the Dursleys' kitchen with the same quiet efficiency as always, eggs, toast, tea, except that something in the set of his shoulders had changed, and if Vernon had been the kind of man who paid attention to such things, he might have noticed it. He wasn't. So he didn't. But Harry noticed, and that was enough. Chapter 2. The ledger. The Hogwarts Express had barely cleared the outskirts of London when Harry spread the ledger across the compartment seat and said, "Right. Hogwarts first." Ron looked up from his chocolate frog. Hermione already had her own notes out, the ones she'd spent the last 3 weeks of summer compiling in the margins of a Muggle notebook she'd covered in a charm that made the writing invisible to anyone who wasn't her or Harry or Ron. She'd been thorough, which was the only way Hermione knew how to be. 3 artifacts inside Hogwarts, Harry said. The ledger gives us wings but not rooms. We need to narrow it down before we start searching, otherwise we're walking the whole castle in the dark. Which we've done before, Ron pointed out. Which I'd like to avoid doing again unnecessarily. Hermione spread her notes beside the ledger. Okay. The 3 Hogwarts artifacts are Hufflepuff's Seed Stone, Gryffindor's Compass of True North, and Ravenclaw's Mirror of Thought. Based on the foundational texts, I got access to 3 books from the restricted section that I'd like to point out I obtained entirely legitimately through the library's summer interloan program. Before either of you makes a face, I wasn't going to make a face, Ron said. You were building up to one. I was building up to a question, which is different. The artifacts, Harry said. Hermione turned her notes to a page dense with cross-references. The seed stone is described in 2 sources as an object Hufflepuff kept in a place of growth. One source says, close to living things, which in a castle context could mean the greenhouses, the grounds, or, and I think this is more likely, the room of requirement, if it was already in use during the founder's time. The room of requirement has been there since the castle was built, Harry said. The Hogwarts, a history chapter on castle architecture mentions it as one of the original structural enchantments. Hermione looked at him. You read Hogwarts, a history? You gave me a copy in June and told me I'd need it. I told you it might be useful. I didn't expect, she stopped. Right. Yes. Good. So, the seed stone possibly in the room of requirement. The compass of true north is trickier. Gryffindor's records are more fragmented than the others, but there's a reference in Binza's foundational notes to a navigation artifact of the Lion's Hall being kept where the brave keep watch. Which is either poetic for the Gryffindor common room or the tower, Harry said. The tower, Hermione agreed. Specifically, there's a sealed storage room 2 floors below the Gryffindor common room entrance that isn't on the standard castle map. It appears in the Marauders. She stopped. It appears in a source I have access to. Ron was grinning. Marauders map. I said what I said. Harry was already thinking about it. The storage room, he'd clocked it on the map more than once, labeled in his father's handwriting as Keeper's Hold, locked, not worth the trouble. He'd assumed it was a broom cupboard. And the Mirror of Thought? That one is interesting, Hermione said, and her voice shifted slightly, the way it did when she'd found something that genuinely excited her rather than just satisfied her research instinct. Ravenclaw's artifacts are consistently described as being kept in use rather than in storage. She didn't hoard things, she deployed them. The Mirror of Thought is described in one source as a glass for the teacher who sees what students cannot, which strongly suggests it was kept in a teaching space. But more specifically, she turned the page. There's a reference, buried in a footnote of Founders and Their Works, which is a terrible book, by the way, almost no citations, to a secret study above the astronomy room that Ravenclaw used when she wished to think without interruption. A room above the astronomy tower? Ron said. Above the classroom, not the tower. There's a difference in the architectural layout, the classroom is lower down, and above it there's, she looked at Harry. I think there's a room that's been sealed so long that it doesn't respond to normal mapping enchantments. Which would explain why it doesn't appear on any maps. But it might respond to an air, Harry said. I think it might, Hermione said. The compartment was quiet for a moment except for the rhythm of the train and the distant sounds of the corridor outside. September light moved across the ledger's pages, catching the slight luminescence that persisted in the text even in reproduction, a remnant of the original's enchantment, Ragnarok had told him, that would remain until all 23 artifacts were recovered. We're not telling anyone, Harry said. Not yet. Agreed, Hermione said immediately. Not even, Ron started. Not even Dumbledore, Harry said. Especially not Dumbledore. Ron was quiet for a second. You think he knew? About all of it? Harry didn't answer right away. He'd thought about it every day since the Gringotts visit, turning it over, testing it against everything he knew about Dumbledore, looking for the version of events where the headmaster was simply uninformed. He kept not finding it. Albus Dumbledore, who knew about the Philosopher's Stone and kept it in a school. Who knew about the Chamber of Secrets and its history and had never thought to mention the heir of Slytherin implication. Who had placed a baby on a doorstep and called it protection and had spent a decade carefully managing what that baby was allowed to understand about itself. I think he knew what I might be, Harry said. I think knowing that, and not telling me, felt to him like protection. He paused. I think a lot of things have felt like protection to Dumbledore that were actually about control. And I don't think he's a bad person because of it. Another pause, longer. But I'm done letting him decide what I need to know. Ron absorbed this. Then he nodded, once, with the directness he had when things were settled. Right then. When do we start? First night. First night is for reconnaissance, Harry said. I need to feel where they are before I go for them directly. Ragnarok said the artifacts would respond to my proximity, warmth, he said. I just need to get close enough to confirm the locations. He looked at both of them. And I need to see Dumbledore first. Face to face. Hear what he says when I ask him directly. What are you going to ask him? Hermione said. Harry thought about it. I'm going to tell him what I know and see what he does with it. That'll tell me more than any answer he could give. Hogwarts in September had the feeling it always did on first arrival, that particular combination of home and history, the way the torchlight caught the stone and made it amber, the way the enchanted ceiling in the great hall held a thin scatter of early September cloud that looked more like a painting than a sky. Harry walked in alongside the rest of the second years with the ledger in his bag and the air certification in the inside pocket of his robes, and he looked up at the staff table and found Dumbledore without difficulty. The headmaster was watching the students arrive with his characteristic expression of benevolent attention, the half-moon spectacles catching the candlelight, the long silver beard arranged over his plum-colored robes. When his gaze reached Harry's section of the Gryffindor table, it paused, just briefly, just the fraction of a second, and something moved in the blue eyes that Harry, now watching for it, caught and filed away. Not surprise. Something quieter than surprise. He knows something happened this summer, Harry thought. He doesn't know what yet. Good. He went to Dumbledore's office the following morning, before breakfast. Not during office hours. Not with a summons. He went because he chose to, at the time he chose, and he knocked on the stone gargoyle with the ease of someone who has decided that doorkeepers are not obstacles. Sherbet lemon, he said, because he'd asked Percy Weasley the password the previous night, casually, in the way you ask things when you want the answer to seem incidental. The gargoyle stepped aside. Harry went up. Dumbledore was at his desk when Harry entered, reading something that he set aside with an air of having anticipated the interruption. The office was the same as always, portraits of former headmasters dozing in their frames, Fawkes on his perch, today burning, mid-cycle, which Harry had learned was normal, the silver instruments on the side table ticking and spinning. Dumbledore gestured to the chair across from his desk with the warmth of a man delighted by an unexpected visit. Harry, he said. This is early. Can I offer you a lemon drop? No thank you, Harry said, sitting down. He didn't ease into it. I was at Gringotts this summer. They contacted me about my vault. A pause. Very small. Dumbledore's expression remained warm and attentive. I hope nothing concerning. They found a discrepancy, Harry said. Between the registered contents of my vault and its current contents. He watched Dumbledore's face the way Ragnarok had watched the basin. 23 items missing. They performed an ancient heritage scan to confirm what was causing the resonance. He let it sit for a moment. The scan came back positive for all 4 founders' bloodlines. The office was quiet. The silver instruments ticked. Fawkes shifted on his perch, half-charred, watching them both with the patient attention of a creature that has witnessed several centuries of human conversation. Dumbledore's expression had not changed. That was, Harry thought, almost more revealing than if it had. That is, Dumbledore said carefully, quite extraordinary news. Isn't it? Harry said. Ragnarok certified it personally. I have the documentation. He didn't produce it, he just let Dumbledore know it existed. What I'm wondering, Professor, is whether this is genuinely new information to you. A long pause. The blue eyes behind the half-moon spectacles were doing the thing they sometimes did, that deep, assessing quality, as if Dumbledore were reading text in a language other than English. Then he sighed, and it was a genuine sigh, not a performance of one, and he took his spectacles off and rubbed the bridge of his nose in a gesture that was surprisingly human. Not entirely, he said. Harry had expected a longer navigation to the truth. The directness was almost surprising. How long? I suspected the theoretical possibility from the time of your birth, Dumbledore said. Your parents' bloodlines, combined, I recognized the convergence in the genealogical records. At the time, I chose not to investigate further. You were a baby, Harry. The priority was your safety. And after? When I was 11. 12. The priority remained your safety. Dumbledore looked at him steadily. I want to be honest with you, because you deserve honesty. Yes, I knew there was a possibility. I chose not to pursue it because the implications of a confirmed convergent founder's heir are significant enough that confirmation itself creates danger. There are people who would have used that information against you. Who would have tried to use you. My intention was always to manage it, Harry said. Not accusingly. Just accurately. A pause. To protect it until the right time. And when was the right time going to be? Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. Then, with the particular grace of someone who is intelligent enough to know when a line of argument has run out, I don't know that I had a clear answer to that. Harry studied him. He believed the honesty of the admission, at least. What he didn't believe was that good intentions made the management acceptable, but that was a longer conversation and he wasn't here for it this morning. The 23 artifacts, Harry said. The ones missing from my vault. Do you know where any of them are? Another pause. This one had a different quality, not reflective, but careful. I have suspicions about some of them, Dumbledore said. There are 3 inside this castle, Harry. I've known about them for some years. They were placed here, at various points, by people who believed they were keeping them safe. They belong in my vault, Harry said. With me. Yes, Dumbledore said. They do. Then I'll be recovering them. Something moved in Dumbledore's expression, not quite resistance, but something adjacent to it, the reflex of someone accustomed to managing situations encountering a situation that is declining to be managed. It lasted only a second. Then he said, I would ask only that you allow me to assist. Some of the protections on those artifacts are complex and dangerous. I'll let you know if I need help, Harry said. He stood up, and the conversation was over, which he could see Dumbledore registering, the simple fact that it was Harry ending it. He said, thank you for being honest with me, Professor, because it was true, and because he wasn't interested in being ungenerous. Then he went to the door. Harry. Dumbledore's voice stopped him. Be careful of Gringotts' motivations in this. They are not neutral parties. The Goblin Nation has its own interests regarding the Founder's artifacts, and their assistance comes with a price, Harry said. Ragnarok made that clear. I'm aware. He looked back at Dumbledore. But at least he told me about it. He went down the moving staircase and out into the corridor, where the morning was beginning and students were drifting toward the Great Hall, and he felt, with a clean and uncomplicated clarity, that he had done exactly what he needed to do. They found the first artifact that night. Harry had spent the day attending classes with his usual attendance to the practical components and his usual tolerance for the theoretical, which was less, but managed. During double transfiguration he'd sat near the back and thought about the keeper's hold on the 7th floor, and during History of Magic, where Binns was covering goblin rebellions of the 15th century with the enthusiasm of a man recounting last Tuesday's weather, Harry had read 3 pages of the ledger under the desk and confirmed the location notation for the compass of true north. At 11 o'clock, when the castle had settled into its sleeping rhythms, Harry pulled out the invisibility cloak, handed Ron the Marauder's map, and the 3 of them went. The 7th floor corridor was quiet. The keeper's hold was where the map said it was, a door set deep into the stone, low-framed, sealed with a lock that had no visible keyhole. Harry stood in front of it and felt something. Warmth. Not metaphorical, actual warmth, a slight, spreading heat that started in his palm and moved up his arm, the same sensation he'd had when his blood touched the Gringotts basin. The door seemed to lean slightly toward him, which was an impression rather than a physical reality, except that Hermione, watching carefully, said under her breath, the stone around the frame just shifted. A fraction of a millimeter, maybe. But it shifted. Harry put his hand flat against the door. The lock didn't click open in the way locks usually do, there was no mechanism, no tumbling of pins. Instead, the door simply ceased to be locked, the way a held breath ceases when released, a quiet letting go of tension that had been maintained for a very long time. It swung inward. Inside was a room the size of a large wardrobe, stone-floored, dust-heavy, smelling of centuries. On a small stone shelf at the back sat an object that was immediately visible because it was the only thing in the room that wasn't dark. It glowed with a faint, steady gold light, like a compass needle caught in afternoon sun. It was round, slightly larger than a pocket watch, made of a metal that wasn't quite gold and wasn't quite bronze, with markings that weren't compass directions in any conventional sense. Instead of N, S, E, W, there were 4 symbols that Harry recognized from the ledger's reproductions of the founder's personal seals. He picked it up. The warmth was immediate and complete, like holding something that had been waiting specifically for his hand. The glow intensified for a moment, pulsed once, and then settled, not fading, but stabilizing, as if it had been searching for the right signal and had now found it. "That's incredible," Hermione breathed. Harry turned it over in his hands. The back was engraved with text too fine to read in the dim light, but he could feel it under his fingertips, deep, deliberate cuts in the metal, letters in a language that might have been the same one from the Gringotts basin, the one that translated itself in the space between seeing and understanding. "One down," Ron said quietly. He was watching the door, map in hand, expression focused. 22 to go, Harry said. He tucked the compass into his jacket pocket, close to the certification letter, close to the ledger. It sat there with a warmth that didn't diminish, a persistent, steady heat that felt nothing like a magical artifact and entirely like a recognition. They went back the way they came, quiet and careful, through the sleeping castle. The room of requirement took 3 passes. Harry had known about the room from second year, Fred and George had mentioned it as a theory, and the Marauder's map showed a corridor on the 7th floor that occasionally contained a room and occasionally didn't. The traditional method of accessing it involved walking past 3 times while thinking about what you needed. Harry tried it on the second night, walking past the tapestry of Barnabas the Barmy with focused intent. "I need to find Hufflepuff seed stone. I need the place where it was hidden." Third pass, a door appeared. The room it opened to was nothing like the cramped utility space he'd imagined. It was large and warm, its floor thick with growing things, not garden neat but wild, a controlled profusion of plants that weren't quite magical and weren't quite mundane, the kind of growth that happens when things are left to find their own shape for a very long time. The light came from no apparent source, that diffuse, even illumination that some enchanted spaces had, and at the center of the room, cradled in the roots of what appeared to be a small tree that had grown up through the stone floor over considerable time, was the seed stone. It was exactly what its name suggested, a stone the size and rough shape of a large seed, deep amber in color, and it pulsed with a light that was slower and more organic than the compass's gold, something more like the rhythm of growth than the rhythm of navigation. When Harry picked it up, the tree's roots loosened around it with the deliberate, unhurried ease of something that had held a thing safely and was now satisfied to release it to the right hands. The seed stone sat in his palm, warm and heavy and quietly luminescent. "Hello," Harry said to it, which was absurd, and which Ron found extremely funny, and which Hermione said was actually not unreasonable given that certain categories of ancient artifact did have a form of consciousness. She'd read about it in Artifacts of Great Antiquity, restricted section, borrowed legitimately through the summer interloan program. "Thank you." 2 down. The room above the astronomy classroom required 4 days and a different approach. The classroom itself was accessible normally, a circular room with observation windows and star charts on the curved walls and a trapdoor in the ceiling that led to the rooftop observation platform. There was nothing above it on any standard map. The castle's interior architecture showed solid stone. But solid stone that had been enchanted by Rowena Ravenclaw 1,000 years ago was a different thing from solid stone, and Harry had figured that out by day 2. He went on the 4th day, alone, in the early morning before the first astronomy session. He stood in the empty classroom in the gray pre-dawn light and looked up at the ceiling and thought, not about needing the room, that was the room of requirements logic, not this one, but about belonging there. About the right of access. He thought about his blood and the basin and the 4 colors of light, and he said, in the old language that he somehow knew, a phrase he'd found in the back of the ledger in a section titled Heir's Acknowledgements, Ravenclaw's text, he told Hermione, who'd gone slightly pale with excitement. The phrase, as best he could render it, "I am of your blood. I return for what was left in keeping." The ceiling shifted. Not dramatically, there was no grinding of stone or theatrical release of magical pressure. It was subtle, like a thought changing. A section of ceiling directly above the star chart on the eastern wall simply became a floor, and above it, visible now as if it had always been there and he simply hadn't had the right eyes before, was a room. Small, scholars neat, with a desk and one chair and bookshelves built into the curved walls and, on the desk, positioned precisely in the center of its surface as if placed there with care, Ravenclaw's mirror of thought. Harry went up through the new opening. The ceiling had become a staircase, 3 steps of stone rising from the classroom floor, and stood in Rowena Ravenclaw's private study and looked at the mirror. It was the size of a hand mirror, its frame carved from dark wood and patterns of interlocking lines, its surface not reflective in the ordinary sense. When Harry looked into it, he didn't see himself. He saw clarity. Which was not a thing you could describe precisely, but it was the best word for it. Looking into the mirror was like looking into a space where thoughts became visible, where the shape of a problem could be seen from outside itself. He stood there for 30 seconds and felt, without understanding why, that 3 things he'd been uncertain about were suddenly not uncertain at all. He took the mirror and came back down through the staircase, which resealed itself above him with the same quiet certainty as it had opened. 3 down. He went back to Dumbledore's office that evening, not because he had to but because he'd said he'd let the headmaster know, and he kept his word even when it was inconvenient. "I've recovered 3, he said, standing in front of the desk. He didn't sit down this time. Dumbledore looked at the 3 artifacts Harry had placed briefly on the desk before picking them up again, the compass, the seed stone, the mirror. Something moved through his expression that Harry couldn't fully identify, pride, maybe, and loss, and something that might have been relief and might have been the opposite. Remarkably quickly, Dumbledore said. "They wanted to be found," Harry said. It wasn't arrogance, it was just the accurate description of how it had felt. "I need to ask you something directly, Professor. The 4 artifacts with ministry-grade shielding, Ragnarok told me about them in August. Do you know who in the ministry has them?" Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. "I have a suspicion," he said. "Not a certainty." "Who?" A pause. "I would ask you to be careful with this information, Harry." "What I tell you, who?" Harry said again. Pleasantly. Absolutely unmovably. Dumbledore looked at him for a long moment. There was something in the look that wasn't calculating so much as adjusting, recalibrating, the way you recalibrate when a situation develops faster than expected. "There is a subdepartment within the Ministry's Department of Mysteries," he said. "The Veil Records Division. They have been collecting and cataloging artifacts of significant magical lineage since the 1940s. Some of what they have cataloged they have also retained. A beat. I believe at least 2 of the shielded artifacts are in the Unspeakable's possession." "And the other 2? Harry said. Dumbledore said nothing. Harry looked at him. Held the look for 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 8. Dumbledore held it back, and the expression in the blue eyes was not evasion, exactly. It was more like the expression of a man standing at the edge of something he is not yet ready to step off. "When you're ready to tell me," Harry said, "you know where to find me." He picked up the 3 artifacts, put them back in his bag, and left. Hermione was waiting in the common room with the ledger and her notebook and an expression of organized urgency. "I've been cross-referencing the black market items," she said as soon as he came through the portrait hole. "Look at this." She turned her notebook to a page covered in a tight web of arrows and annotations. 2 of the auctioned artifacts, Slytherin's Serpent Compass and Gryffindor's War Gauntlet, there's an auction notice here, in the back pages of the ledger, in the small print. Gringotts has been monitoring them. She tapped the page. There's an auction. Knockturn Alley, a shop called Borgin and Burke's but operating out of a back room that isn't registered with the ministry. The ledger's notation says imminent sale. "Harry, I think this means, someone's about to sell 2 founders' artifacts on the black market," Harry said. "Within the next 2 weeks, based on the notation's dating convention." Hermione looked at him. We need to move fast. Ron looked up from the chess game he'd been playing against himself, which he'd been winning decisively on both sides. Are we going to Knockturn Alley? We are, Harry said. During term, Hermione said. Without permission. To infiltrate a black market auction in the back room of an unregistered shop. Yes, Harry said. She looked at her notebook. She looked at the ledger. She wrote something down, crossed it out, and wrote it again. Fine, she said. But we plan it properly. Obviously, Harry said. I'm just saying. Last time we operated without a proper plan, we were 12, Ron said helpfully. We're still 12, Hermione said. Technically. For a few more months. We're children infiltrating a criminal auction. We're the heir of all 4 founders infiltrating a criminal auction to recover stolen family property, Harry said. There's a legal distinction. That is not, she stopped. Actually, there might be. Under the Charter of 974, the heir has the right of direct recovery by any lawful means. Ragnarok specifically used that language. She was writing again. That might actually constitute lawful authority. A pause. I can't believe I'm using a goblin banking compact to justify a Knockturn Alley infiltration. Welcome to my life, Harry said. Ron was grinning at his chess pieces. 2 weeks, he said. We've got the Serpent Compass and the War Gauntlet, 2 founders' artifacts, a legal mandate, and a plan we haven't made yet. He moved a knight. I'm going to call this Thursday. Thursday feels right. It's a Wednesday night auction, Hermione said, consulting the ledger. Wednesday then. Equally good. Ron looked up. Harry. 4 down if we go. 19 to go. Harry looked at the common room, the fire, the familiar noise of it, the red and gold warmth of a place that was his because of blood he hadn't known he carried. He looked at the ledger in Hermione's hands, at the 3 artifacts in his bag, warm and recovered, and finally in the hands they were meant for. Wednesday, he said. That night, lying in his bed in the dormitory with the curtains drawn and the 3 artifacts arranged on his bedside table, compass, seed stone, mirror, Harry looked at the ceiling and let himself think about the bigger shape of it. 23 artifacts. 3 recovered. 4 with ministry shielding, 2 of which might be unspeakable property. 3 in Malfoy family possession, technically legally transferred. The remaining 11 scattered across Britain with varying degrees of traceability. And Dumbledore, who knew about 2 of the ministry shielded ones and wouldn't name them. Who had known about Harry's heritage theoretically since before Harry was born. Who had managed 12 years of careful, affectionate, genuinely well-intentioned control that had kept Harry useful and navigable and perpetually slightly behind the information curve. Done with that, Harry thought, not angrily. Just with finality, the way you close a book you finished. He reached over and picked up the compass of true north, turning it in his fingers in the dark. It glowed softly, the 4 founders' seals on its face catching the thin moonlight from the dormitory window. He looked at the symbol for Slytherin, the serpent, subtle and direct at once, and thought about Wednesday. About Knockturn Alley and a black market auction and 2 artifacts that were about to be sold to whoever had the gold and the connections. Not anymore. The compass pulsed once, gently, as if agreeing. Harry put it down, rolled over, and went to sleep. Chapter 3, The Market. Wednesday arrived the way significant days sometimes do, quietly, dressed as an ordinary thing, indistinguishable from the Tuesdays and Thursdays around it until you were already inside it and the ordinary part was over. Harry spent the morning in classes. Double potions with Snape, which had the quality of a chess match where one player had decided the game was beneath him and communicated this through every move. Harry brewed a competent swelling solution and ignored Snape's commentary on his technique and thought about Knockturn Alley. Charms with Flitwick, which was genuinely useful. They were covering concealment charms, which Harry absorbed with more focus than Flitwick probably expected, given that concealment was going to be relevant in approximately 8 hours. Ron spent lunch eating and radiating the specific calm of someone who has decided a plan is sound and has moved on from worrying about it. Hermione spent lunch going over the plan for the fourth time, not because she thought it needed changing but because going over things was how she processed the anxiety of waiting. The plan was this: Hogsmeade weekend was 3 days away, which was too far. So Hermione had identified a service entrance at the base of the astronomy tower that connected, through a series of passages that her meticulous cross-referencing of the Marauder's map and Hogwarts, a history had revealed, to an exterior door that opened onto the lower grounds. From there, with the invisibility cloak covering all three of them in the cramped way it managed for their height, they could reach the edge of the Forbidden Forest's eastern border, where an old estate road ran down to the village. Hogsmeade itself wasn't the destination. They needed to get to Diagon Alley, which required the Floo network, which required getting to the 3 broomsticks without being seen, which was the tightest part. Harry had spent an hour reading the Charter of 974's recovery provisions, which Ragnarok had included in the document package, and had found, as Hermione had suspected, a clause that stated the heir could employ the assistance of the issuing bank's agents in recovery operations. He'd written to Ragnarok that morning. The reply had come back within 2 hours, which was fast even for Goblin communication, and it contained a single small item, a bronze token stamped with the Gringotts crest, with a note that said simply, "Present this at any Floo connection. Our name will cover the passage." "They want the artifacts recovered as much as we do," Hermione had said, reading the note. "More, possibly," Harry had said. "It's a matter of institutional honor for them. The artifacts were in their protection and they lost them. So we're essentially doing their repo work," Ron had said. "We're recovering stolen family property," Harry said. "They're providing logistical assistance." "That's repo work with better branding," Ron said, but he'd pocketed the token without argument. They left at 9 in the evening, when the castle had shifted into its post-dinner rhythm, prefects doing rounds, younger students heading for bed, the corridors thinning gradually from busy to intermittent. The service passage was where Hermione said it would be, a narrow door that opened with a basic allohammer once you found the seam in the stone, leading down a passage that smelled of old timber and torch smoke and came out, exactly as predicted, at an exterior door on the castle's lower eastern face. Outside, the night was clear and cold for September, the kind of cold that comes when the day's warmth exits abruptly at sunset. The grounds were dark and quiet, the Forbidden Forest a solid black edge to their right, the castle behind them glowing amber from 100 windows. Under the cloak, 3 of them moving in the practice step-together coordination they developed over 2 years of sneaking, they went down the estate road. "I want to point out," Hermione said quietly, "that if we're caught, we lose house points, receive detention, and I will have to live with the shame of a disciplinary record for the rest of my academic career." "Noted," Harry said. "I'm not saying we don't go. I'm documenting my awareness of the risk." "You're stress cataloging," Ron said. "It's fine. You do it every time. We always end up being okay. We ended up in a 3-headed dog's room last year. And we were okay." "Ron, Fluffy sat on your foot." "Okay enough," Ron said. "That's the relevant metric." Harry was watching the road ahead, and the slight warmth in his jacket pocket where the compass and the seed stone and the mirror sat together, wrapped in a cloth the Gringotts documents had recommended for keeping artifacts stable in transit. He'd left them accessible rather than locked in his trunk. They were his, and he kept his own things close. The 3 broomsticks was warm and noisy enough at 9:30 that 3 students under an invisibility cloak could move through the edge of the room without significant risk. Madame Rosmerta was busy with a table of witches having what appeared to be a very entertaining argument, and the Floo alcove was in a back corridor that saw less traffic. Harry presented the Gringotts token at the Floo fireplace, which flared a brief bronze color before settling into normal green. He said, "Nocturne Alley," and went through. The Floo sensation was always the same, spinning, fire-adjacent, the brief vertigo of transit, and then the fireplace at the other end, a grate in a narrow shop that smelled of dust and something sulphurous, and beyond it, through a grimy window, the unmistakable atmosphere of Nocturne Alley at night. Nocturne Alley after dark was a different proposition from Nocturne Alley in daylight. The daytime version was furtive and dim but manageable. The nighttime version was purposeful in a way that the daylight version wasn't. Things were happening here, business being conducted, transactions taking place that required the cover of darkness not because they were necessarily illegal, some of them weren't, technically, but because the kind of people engaged in them preferred privacy to scrutiny. The alley was narrower than Diagon, the buildings closer together, the overhead space a tight corridor of old wood and overhanging signs. Torches burned in iron brackets at intervals, giving more shadow than light. The street was populated but not crowded, clusters of figures in robes that ranged from shabby to expensive, small groups, the occasional solitary walker with the focused gait of someone who knows exactly where they're going and prefers not to be asked. Harry and Ron and Hermione moved under the cloak to the mouth of a side passage that the ledger's annotated map marked as Callowell Court. The Gringotts file on the auction had been specific, a room behind the registered premises of Borgin and Burke's, accessible through Callowell Court, operating under the name the Collectors' Exchange. There, Hermione said softly. The entrance to Callowell Court was marked by a sign so faded it was almost invisible, a painted hand, extended, the fingers pointing down toward the alley floor. Below it, in lettering that might once have been gold, the words Private Commerce. A man in dark green robes stood at the entrance with the specific quality of stillness that security personnel develop. He was checking something on a list, admitting the occasional figure with a brief word and a nod. The check appeared to involve showing a piece of paper or a small object, an invitation, presumably. "We don't have an invitation," Ron murmured. "We don't need one," Harry said. The man at the door might have thoughts about that. "The man at the door is going to have a different problem in a moment," Harry said. He studied the entrance. The guard's attention was on the mouth of the court, not on the wall immediately to the right of it, where a section of brickwork was offset slightly, old settlement in the building, a gap of perhaps 4 inches where a torch bracket had been removed and the stone had never been repointed. It was nothing, architecturally. But 4 inches of gap meant a line of sight to the interior of the court, and a line of sight meant a possible confusion charm if cast from a sufficient angle. Harry pulled out his wand, angled it past the guard's peripheral vision, and cast a non-verbal confundus, clean, targeted, the kind Flitwick had covered 3 weeks ago as a third-year syllabus preview that Harry had quietly practiced that evening. The guard blinked. Turned to look at something to his left that wasn't there. Turned back, frowning slightly, the list temporarily forgotten. "Now," Harry said, and they moved. Through the entrance, past the guard, into Callowell Court in 30 seconds of careful movement. The guard was already recovering. The confundus would last 30 seconds at their current skill, maybe 40, but they were past him and the court was ahead. It was a small, enclosed yard, cobblestoned, with 3 doorways opening off it. 2 were clearly residential, curtained windows, flower pots, the domestic details of actual habitation. The third was different, no windows, a door of heavy dark wood with no external handle, a small brass slot at eye height that suggested a viewing window on the interior side. "Knock or don't knock," Ron said. "Don't knock," Harry said. He pressed his hand flat against the door, the way he pressed his hand against the keeper's hold. Nothing happened. Obviously. This wasn't a founder's artifact, it was just a locked door. He cast Alohomora and it opened anyway, because it turned out that for all the drama of dark market auctions, the actual physical security was a man at a curtained entrance and one standard locking charm, which said something about the confidence of people who operated in shadows. They relied on the shadows rather than the locks. The room beyond was larger than the exterior suggested, a long, low-ceilinged space with rows of chairs facing a raised platform at the far end, the walls hung with dark cloth, the light coming from floating globes of something that wasn't quite normal luminescence. Perhaps 40 people sat in the chairs, spread across perhaps 60 seats, the kind of sparse attendance that suggested either careful exclusivity or the late stages of an auction that had been running a while. On the platform, behind a podium that suggested an auctioneer's setup, stood a witch in grey robes with the precise manner of someone who had been conducting these events for a long time and had long since stopped being surprised by the category of people who attended them. She was mid-sentence when Harry, Ron, and Hermione came in through the back of the room, still under the cloak, and found positions along the rear wall. Lot 17, which the catalogue describes as a navigational instrument of pre-10th century origin, provenance uncertain, but carrying magical signatures consistent with objects from the founding period of British wizarding education, Harry felt it immediately. The warmth. Stronger than it had been with the Hogwarts artifacts, more urgent, almost reaching, the way a compass needle reaches toward north. He looked at the platform and there, on a velvet-covered table to the auctioneer's right, were two items. One was a compass. Not the same as the Gryffindor compass of true north, this was larger, its face not circular but slightly elongated, with a needle that moved in slow spirals rather than locking to a direction, and markings that Harry could see, even from the back of the room, were in serpentine patterns. The serpent compass. He felt it the same way he'd felt the others, the recognition of something that knew his blood and was responding to proximity. Beside it was a gauntlet. Right hand, dark metal, articulated fingers, and etched along each knuckle with lion head engravings so fine they looked like they'd been made by something more precise than any human tool. The war gauntlet. Even under the room's artificial light it had the quality of the compass of true north, that particular glow that wasn't luminescent so much as presence. Opening bid for lot 17 at 200 galleons, do I have 200, a hand went up near the front. 200 from the bidder in the third row, do I have 250, another hand, to the left. Harry was already thinking. They were at the back of the room, invisible, with the artifacts on a visible platform. The simplest approach was also the most direct, wait for the auction to end, follow whoever purchased the artifacts, and take them back in the confusion of the crowd dispersing. But that had variables, the buyer might disapparate immediately, or have security, or move into spaces Harry couldn't follow. The better approach was more direct than that. He leaned between Ron and Hermione and said, very quietly, I'm going to the front. Obviously not under the cloak, Hermione said, equally quietly. Obviously not. A pause. Harry, they're stolen property, he said. Mine. I have the legal documentation on me. I have the charter provision for direct recovery. I'm going to the front of the room, I'm going to show the auctioneer what she needs to see, and I'm going to take them. 40 people in here, Ron murmured. Some of them are not going to be happy about that. I know. Some of them might be the kind of not happy that involves wands. I know that too. He felt Ron absorbing this. Then Ron said, with the resigned cheerfulness of a person who has committed to a course of action and has decided to enjoy it, right. You go front. We flank left and right and keep the cloak for now. Keep the cloak until it's useful to drop it, Harry said. Follow my lead. He shed the cloak, handed his end to Ron, straightened his robes, put his wand in his hand with the ease of someone for whom the wand is a natural extension, and walked up the center aisle of the auction room toward the platform. It took the room about 5 seconds to notice him. He was 12 years old and wearing school robes, which was not the typical profile of a Nocturne Alley auction attendee, and the combination of his age and the complete absence of hesitation in his walk created a specific cognitive dissonance that held people's attention for the several seconds he needed. The auctioneer saw him first. Her expression went through surprise to calculation to professional assessment in quick succession. This is a private event, she said, with the tone of someone who has removed difficult people before and is willing to do so again. I know, Harry said. He reached the platform steps, went up them without invitation, and stood on the platform's edge. I apologize for the interruption. He reached into his robes and produced the Gringotts certification, the full document, with Ragnarok's seal prominent at the top. He held it so the auctioneer could see it clearly. My name is Harry Potter. These two items, he indicated the serpent compass and the war gauntlet, are the property of the Potter family vault, removed without the heir's consent. I have here a certified document from Director Ragnarok of Gringotts confirming my status as hereditary owner. Under the Charter of 974, I'm exercising the right of direct recovery. The room had gone very quiet. The auctioneer was reading the document without touching it, her eyes moving quickly, the calculation in her expression now very focused. She was good at her job. Harry could see her processing the legal position rapidly, weighing the options. The items in this auction were provided by a client with, she began. Incomplete title, Harry said. They don't have the right to sell them because they didn't have the right to possess them. Whatever provenance documentation they provided is invalid against a primary heir claim. He paused. I'm not here to cause trouble for this venue. I'm not interested in who provided the items. I just want the items. A chair scraped at the front of the room. Harry looked. A man in expensive black robes had stood up, late 50s, heavy, with the particular look of someone accustomed to purchasing things without resistance. He had a face that had probably been threatening at 40 and had softened into something still unpleasant but less physically intimidating. Who exactly do you think you are, boy? The man said. Harry looked at him. I just told the room exactly who I am. Were you not paying attention, or do you need it repeated? A ripple went through the seated crowd, not laughter, but something adjacent to it, the involuntary response to watching someone young say something that should have been deferential and wasn't. The man's face went dark. Get him out, he said to no one in particular, with the confidence of someone who expected that no one in particular would respond. Two large men at the room's side walls began to move. Harry looked at them. He felt the warmth of the artifacts behind him and the weight of the wand in his hand and the absolute clarity of the position he occupied, legally, physically, and in every other sense, and he raised his wand with the same natural ease as you'd raise a hand to make a point. The shield charm he cast was not subtle. It wasn't meant to be. It expanded from his wand in a visible hemisphere of force that caught both approaching men simultaneously and sent them, not violently but very firmly, back to the walls they'd come from. They hit the dark cloth hangings with a sound like a large book being shut, slid to the floor, and sat there looking confused. The room processed this. I've been very polite about this, Harry said, to the room in general and the heavy man in particular. He was aware that his voice was level, not raised, not performing calm, just actually calm, because the situation was clearly navigable and the artifacts were 3 feet behind him and the law was on his side. The 2 items on that table belong to my family. I have the documentation. The seller had no legal right to them. The auction of these specific items is therefore void. He looked at the auctioneer. You can verify the certification with Gringotts directly. I'd recommend doing that. Back to the room. I'm going to take the items now. Anyone who would like to raise a wand about that is welcome to consider whether the legal consequences of interfering with an heir's direct recovery claim are worth whatever they were hoping to bid. The heavy man at the front took a step forward. His hand was moving toward his wand. Don't, said a voice from the back of the room. It was Ron. He'd dropped the cloak, as had Hermione, and they were standing at the rear of the room with their wands drawn, and Hermione had something in her other hand, the second copy of the Gringotts certification that she'd had prepared, because of course she had a second copy, and she was holding it up clearly for the room to see. Interference with a Gringotts certified heir claim is classified as obstruction under Section 12 of the Charter of 974, Hermione said, with the tone of someone reading from a document because they have memorized it and are choosing to read it anyway for emphasis. Maximum penalty is seizure of all assets currently held in Gringotts vaults and a 10-year trading prohibition. Just so everyone has the relevant information. The heavy man's hand stopped moving. The room stayed very still. Harry turned to the velvet table. He picked up the serpent compass first. The warmth was immediate and intense, the most responsive of the artifacts he'd handled yet, like it had been waiting the longest or been most aware of its displacement. The Slytherin seal on its face glowed briefly silver, then settled. He picked up the war gauntlet second and felt it conform slightly to his grip in a way that was probably meant for a hand larger than his but that still felt unmistakably correct, the way a name feels correct when someone finally gets the pronunciation right. He turned back to the room. Thank you for your cooperation, he said, to the auctioneer specifically, who was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite categorize, not hostile, not admiring, something between the two, like a person watching a natural event. If the seller wants to dispute the claim, they can file with Gringotts. The bank will be happy to demonstrate that the items were removed from the Potter vault without authorization. He paused. It's not a dispute they'll win. He came down from the platform and walked the length of the room, and the 40 seated people watched him go, and nobody moved. Ron pulled the door open. Hermione went first. Harry went through last, and the heavy man at the front was still standing with his hand half raised toward his wand and his face in the particular arrangement of a person who has calculated the situation and found the calculation doesn't favor him. The door closed behind them. Callowell Court was cold and quiet. The three of them moved quickly to the courtyard exit, back under the cloak, and into Knockturn Alley proper, and they were 20 feet from the Floo connection point before Ron let out a breath that had probably been held since the shield charm. That was, he started. Not now, Harry said. I'm just saying, when we're through the Floo. They went through in quick succession, back to the Three Broomsticks alcove, back out into the cold Hogsmeade night, back under the cloak and up the estate road and through the service entrance and into the castle's warmth. In the passage, in the dark, Hermione put her back against the stone wall and exhaled. You sent two grown men into a wall, she said. They were coming at me. I know they were coming at you. I'm not criticizing the decision, I'm processing it. The shield charm it worked. It was a third-year charm, she said. Cast non-verbally. By a second year. In a stressful situation. Against two moving targets simultaneously. She looked at him. That's not normal, Harry. I practiced it. When? Tuesday evening. In the bathroom. Flitwick covered it last week. Flitwick covered the verbal version as a preview of third-year material. You cast the non-verbal version against two people and it worked. It worked, Harry agreed. Hermione opened her mouth, closed it, looked at her notebook as if she wanted to document this, then apparently decided this was not the moment for documentation. Ron had the war gauntlet in his hands, turning it over in the torchlight. Gryffindor's war gauntlet, he said, with the particular reverence of a boy who had grown up hearing stories about the founders the way other families tell stories about famous ancestors. My mum's going to, well. She'll never know. But she would have, he stopped. This is extraordinary. It is, Harry said. He took the gauntlet and tucked it into the cloth with the others. The warmth of 5 artifacts together had a different quality than the warmth of 3, richer, layered, like the difference between a single instrument and a chord. 5 down. 18 to go. They went back to the common room through the normal routes, and Harry sat in the chair nearest the fire, and Hermione opened the ledger to the Malfoy section, and they worked for another hour in the quiet warmth of a castle that was old and knowing and, Harry thought, had been waiting for this specific sequence of events for a very long time. The fallout came at breakfast. Not dramatically, there was no ministry owl, no confrontation, no visible indication that anything had happened. But Harry arrived at the great hall to find a small folded note beside his pumpkin juice, delivered by a Gringotts owl that had already departed, and the note contained 4 words in Ragnar's handwriting, the market herd. Good. Harry pocketed it and ate his eggs. The second note arrived during Transfiguration, a sealed envelope, no sender, the wax pressed with a mark Harry didn't recognize. He opened it under the desk. Mr. Potter, it has come to my attention that certain items were removed last night from a private commercial event in Knockturn Alley. These items were in the process of legitimate sale, regardless of your documentation claims. I suggest we discuss this privately before either of us takes further action. I can be reached through the usual channels. A friend of several parties who would prefer discretion. No name. The handwriting was educated, deliberate, the kind that came from being taught by a person rather than a school. Harry turned the note over. The back was blank. He folded it, put it in his pocket, and spent the rest of Transfiguration thinking about who it might be, not the heavy bidder, whose energy had been entitlement rather than strategy. Someone else, then. Someone who had been in the room or connected to it. Someone who knew how to reach Harry through channels that weren't Owl Post and who described himself as a friend of several parties. After class, he showed it to Hermione and Ron. Several parties, Hermione read. That's interesting phrasing. Not my client or my employer. Multiple parties. Someone who operates between different interests, Harry said. A broker, Ron said. Magical black market runs on brokers, Mom mentioned it once when she was warning us about Nocturne. People who connect buyers to sellers without being directly involved. Deniability. And now a broker is reaching out to discuss things privately, Hermione said. Which means either they want to threaten you, negotiate with you, or, she paused. Or they're frightened. Harry thought about that. Which one do you think? Hermione looked at the note again. The phrasing is too careful for a threat. You don't write "I suggest we discuss" when you intend to threaten, you write something more declarative. This is someone who is recalculating. She put it down. Someone for whom last night changed the expected outcome of something they were managing. The artifacts had buyers lined up, Harry said. Whoever was going to purchase them had a plan for them. We interrupted that plan. And whoever was brokering the chain is now holding a transaction that can't complete, Ron said. And may have angry clients, Hermione added. Who blamed the broker for the interruption? Harry picked the note up. Unknown broker, frightened of their clients, reaching out to the person who caused the problem. He turned the note over one more time. This is useful. It's dangerous, Hermione said. Also useful, Harry said. Someone in the middle of this chain wants to talk. That means they have information. And information is more valuable than, he thought about the 40-person auction room, the velvet table, the 2 artifacts now warm in his bag. More valuable than anything we're going to find in a room. He tucked the note away. Ron was watching him with the particular expression he wore when Harry was doing the thing that was simultaneously the obviously correct and obviously risky choice. So we're responding to the anonymous note from the unknown broker who moves stolen artifacts. We're gathering information, Harry said. That's the same thing dressed up. It is. Yes. Ron shrugged, with the magnificent philosophical acceptance of a person who has fully committed to a path and finds arguing about it aesthetically uninteresting at this point. How do we respond to someone who didn't give us their name or a return address? We don't, Harry said. They'll come to us. They said I can be reached through the usual channels, which implies they think I know what those channels are. He paused. Which means they think they know me. Or know about me well enough to assume I have the same contacts they do. Gringotts, Hermione said immediately. Gringotts, Harry agreed. The note will have gone through Gringotts' channels somehow, that's the one connection we publicly demonstrated last night by using the FLU token. Our broker has Gringotts connections. Someone with feet in both worlds, Hermione said slowly. Legitimate magical finance and black market artifact trade. They looked at each other. I'll write to Ragnarok, Harry said. The reply came the following morning, early enough to suggest Ragnarok had been awake when it arrived. It was longer than his usual responses, 3 full paragraphs, which Harry suspected was the most the director had written to anyone in considerable time. Your instinct about the broker is correct. There is an individual known to Gringotts who operates as a third-party intermediary in high-value magical artifact transactions, working across both legitimate and less legitimate markets. We have been aware of this individual's activities for some years. They are known to us as Cassius Vane. Vane is not a criminal in the technical sense, he has been careful. He moves between worlds with the specific skill of a person whose value lies in not being definitively attached to either. He has, we believe, brokered at least 6 of your artifacts' movements over the past 2 decades, not including last night. He is frightened, as you inferred. He is frightened because the people who expected those artifacts have significant resources and significantly less patience than himself. He will want to make a deal. We would advise you to let him make one, within reason. People who are frightened and want to make deals will tell you more than people you confront. There is one additional matter we should discuss. The notation on Artifact 14, Slytherin's Codex, has been updated. Gringotts has received intelligence suggesting it has left Britain entirely. Time may be a factor. Harry read the letter 3 times. Then he took out the ledger and found Artifact 14. 14. Slytherin's Codex, a book of foundational magical theory, authored by Salazar Slytherin, believed to contain the original frameworks for several branches of advanced magic currently in use. Last recorded location, Potter Family Vault, 1943. Current status, absent. Location, unknown. Note, high interest from multiple parties. High interest from multiple parties. He thought about Dumbledore, who hadn't told him about the Ministry shielded artifacts. About the broker, Cassius Vane, who had moved 6 artifacts over 20 years. About the Slytherin Codex, which had left the country and might be moving. Hermione was reading over his shoulder. She'd developed the habit of appearing at his elbow whenever significant mail arrived, which he'd stopped noticing as unusual approximately 3 weeks into term. The Codex, she said. If it leaves Britain and ends up in a private collection overseas, we'd have no legal jurisdiction, Harry said. The Charter of 974 is a British instrument. It doesn't have international force. Her voice had the carefully controlled quality of someone not panicking. Harry, that changes the timeline on everything. We can't take the Malfoy artifacts through a slow legal process if one of the others is about to become unrecoverable. I know, Harry said. The Malfoy artifacts are technically legally held. The Codex technically isn't but is about to become practically unrecoverable. The Ministry artifacts are shielded. We have 3 different categories of problem all requiring different approaches, all on different timelines, Hermione. She stopped. One thing at a time, he said. Vane first. He's the connection between all of these, he brokered 6 movements. If he knows where the Codex went, we can get ahead of it. He looked at her. We're not losing the Codex. How do we find Vane if we don't have a way to contact him? Ragnarok said he'll come to us, Harry said. But I'm not going to wait for him. He looked at the letter again, then at the ledger. Ragnarok knows him. I'm going to ask Ragnarok to arrange a meeting. And the Malfoy situation? Runs parallel. We start building the legal case now. You said the Charter has provisions for challenging transfers made without the heir's knowledge. Section 8, Hermione said immediately. Retroactive invalidation of transfers made from a vault to which the current heir had not yet assumed legal guardianship. It's complicated, but it exists. Start building it, Harry said. I want the legal case ready before we walk into Malfoy Manor. Ron, who had arrived at some point and was sitting across from them reading the Ragnarok letter with the absorbed attention of someone who had gotten very good at speed processing significant information, looked up. Malfoy Manor, he said. We're going to Malfoy Manor. Eventually, Harry said. I'm noting this for the record, Ron said, as another item in the list of things I've agreed to that my mother would consider categorically insane. He went back to the letter. The Codex, he said. Slytherin wrote a book containing the original frameworks for several branches of advanced magic and someone's trying to smuggle it out of Britain. Yes, Harry said. Right, Ron said. So, Vane, the Codex, legal case for Malfoy, and the Ministry problem, all simultaneously. He set the letter down. We're going to be busy. We're going to be busy, Harry agreed. Outside the great hall windows, the Hogwarts grounds ran down to the lake under a grey September sky, and the castle was old and enormous and full of history that Harry was only beginning to understand was, in ways no one had told him about, partly his. He looked out at it for a moment, the grounds, the sky, the forest's dark edge, and felt the warmth of 5 recovered artifacts in his bag and the weight of 18 still missing, and somewhere out there a broker who was frightened and a book that was moving and a set of problems that were all accelerating toward timelines he hadn't yet mapped. Good, he thought. He preferred things that were moving. Write to Ragnarok, he told Hermione. Tell him we want to meet Vane. This week if possible. He stood. And Ron, already standing, Ron said, who was. We've got charms in 10 minutes. Try not to think about Malfoy Manor during the lesson. I'll try to think about it only some of the time, Ron said. That's the most I can offer. Harry almost smiled. That's all I'm asking. They went to class, and the day moved around them, and somewhere in the gap between what Harry knew and what he was still finding out, 18 artifacts waited, in vaults, in ministry archives, in the hands of people who had spent years believing the heir was either too young, too uninformed, or too managed to come for them. They were about to find out they'd miscalculated on all 3 counts. Chapter 4, The Malfoy Problem. The meeting with Cassius Vane happened on a Saturday, at Gringotts, in a room that was neither the ancient heritage chamber nor the standard client meeting rooms but something in between, a space that suggested neutrality the way a courtroom suggests neutrality, which is to say deliberately and with the understanding that neutrality is itself a kind of position. Vane was already seated when Harry arrived. He was a man of perhaps 50, slim in the way that suggested a younger life of more substantial build, with grey-threaded hair worn longer than ministry fashion and the kind of face that had learned not to give away its immediate reactions. His robes were good quality but not ostentatious, the clothes of a man who could afford to announce himself and had decided announcing himself was a liability. He looked at Harry when Harry came in, and his expression did the thing expressions do when expectation meets reality and finds them misaligned. He'd expected something. Not this. Not a 12-year-old in school robes who sat down across the table with the unhurried ease of a man 3 times his age. Ragnarok was present but seated to the side, a position that indicated witness rather than participant. He'd told Harry before the meeting, I will be present. I will not speak unless asked. This is your meeting. Harry had appreciated the clarity. Mr. Vane, Harry said. Mr. Potter. Vane's voice was measured, with the particular flatness of someone controlling the timbre deliberately. You're younger than I expected. People keep saying that, Harry said. I assume you didn't ask for this meeting to discuss my age. A slight adjustment in Vane's expression, recalibration, quick and practiced. No. I asked for this meeting because you disrupted a transaction I was managing, and that disruption has created complications for me that I'd like to resolve. The 2 artifacts from Wednesday's auction. Among others. Yes. He paused. You have documentation from Gringotts. I've seen it, Ragnarok forwarded the relevant sections. Your claim to the items is legally sound. I'm not disputing that. Good, Harry said. Then we're agreed on what they are. What I want to know is where they came from and where they were going. Vane was quiet for a moment. He had the stillness of a man calculating multiple variables simultaneously. What I tell you about provenance chains, he said carefully, has implications for parties who didn't authorize me to share that information. I understand that, Harry said. I also understand that the people who didn't authorize you to share it are probably the same people who are currently unhappy with you because their auction went sideways. So I'm wondering whether your loyalty to their privacy is being appropriately compensated, given the current situation. Vane looked at him for a long moment. Something shifted behind his eyes, not warmth, but a kind of professional appreciation, the recognition of a fellow traveler in the territory of strategic conversation. You're direct, he said. I find it saves time, Harry said. You're frightened. Not of me specifically, of whoever expected those artifacts to sell on Wednesday and didn't. Those people have resources and they're unhappy, and you're the one who managed the chain that failed. My disruption is your problem, which means solving my problem might solve yours. He leaned forward slightly. Tell me where the artifacts in that auction came from. Tell me what you know about the Slytherin Codex. And tell me whatever else you know about the movement of the other artifacts from my family vault. In return, I'll tell Gringotts that you cooperated fully with the heir's recovery effort, which under the charter gives you a degree of legal protection from the heir's side of the dispute. Vane looked at Ragnarok. That protection is real? Section 14, Ragnarok said. Cooperating witnesses in heir recovery claims are afforded a certification of non-liability for transactions conducted prior to heir confirmation. Yes. It's real. Vane turned back to Harry. He was quiet for several seconds. Then he reached into his robes and produced a folded sheaf of papers that he placed on the table between them. The auction items came from a collector in Edinburgh who acquired them 8 years ago through a private sale. He acquired them from a family in Wiltshire who received them as a bequest in 1971. He tapped the papers. The provenance chain goes back further than that, but those are the last 3 steps. The Wiltshire family, Harry said. Vane's expression stayed neutral. The Malfoy family, yes. Harry had known it was coming, the ledger was clear enough, but hearing it said aloud in a Gringotts meeting room had a different quality, more concrete, more actionable. He kept his expression level and let Vane continue. The Malfoys gave several items to private collectors over the decades, Vane said. Not sold, gifted. Which is a useful distinction legally, because it severs the direct ownership chain, but, he glanced at the Gringotts certification Harry had laid on the table. Not useful against a primary heir claim. No, Harry said. It isn't. He looked at the papers. The Codex. Vane's expression changed slightly, the first genuine sign of discomfort he'd shown. The Codex is a different matter. I didn't broker that one. I know who did. A man named Fenchich, operates out of Amsterdam, very high-end clients only. The Codex was moved approximately 2 months ago. My understanding is that it was purchased by someone who intended to take it out of Britain. Where is it now? Amsterdam, most likely. Fenchich's usual safe house before overseas delivery. But the delivery window, he paused, is probably within the next 2 weeks. After that, I don't know where it goes, and finding it becomes significantly harder. Who purchased it? I don't have a name. What I have is, he pulled a separate folded paper from the sheaf. The code Fenchich uses for clients of this type. The buyer is identified in the chain as Argentum. Latin for silver. Which is, either a Slytherin reference or a Malfoy reference or both, Hermione said from beside Harry. Vane blinked at her. She'd been so quiet he'd apparently forgotten she was there. Or a coincidence, he said. Is it a coincidence? Harry asked. Vane looked at the table. I don't think so, no. Harry picked up the papers, scanned them quickly, handed them to Hermione, who had her notebook open before they reached her hands. He looked at Vane. One more question. How many of the 23 artifacts from my vault have you personally handled in brokering? 6, as Ragnarok told you. Where did all 6 originate? What was the common source? Vane was quiet. He was looking at the table again, in the way that people look at flat surfaces when they're thinking about something above the level of ordinary discomfort. All 6, he said finally, were initially moved from the Potter Vault during the period 1943 to 1979. The earliest movements, from the 1940s, I can't trace directly. But the 1970s movements, 4 of the 6, came from a single source. He looked up. Someone with authorized access to the Potter Vault who made systematic withdrawals over the course of approximately 5 years. The room was very quiet. Who had authorized access to the Potter Vault in the 1970s? Harry asked. I'm not certain of all parties, Vane said. But in the case of those 4 withdrawals, the vault access records, which Gringotts can confirm, indicate a single individual. Another pause. Albus Dumbledore. The walk back to the castle from Hogsmeade was quiet. Not the comfortable quiet of people who don't need to fill space with noise, but the weighted quiet of people processing something that needs processing. Ron had been waiting outside the Gringotts annex. Ragnar had arranged the meeting in a Hogsmeade branch for ease of access, and Harry had summarized the meeting in about 40 words, which was all it needed, and Ron had gone quiet too, in solidarity. They walked up the road toward the castle with the afternoon around them, cold and clear, and at some point Hermione said, "It could have been authorized by your parents. Before they died, they might have allowed Dumbledore access." "He had vault access from 1975, Harry said. "My parents were married in 1978. My dad was in school until 1978. He did the arithmetic. He'd have needed the Potter family's authorization." "My grandparents." "Not my parents." "Your grandparents died in 1979, Hermione said quietly. Dragon pox epidemic. I looked it up. So Dumbledore had vault access from 1975 to whenever the access was revoked. My grandparents died in 1979. The withdrawals happened between 1975 and 1979. Harry thought about this. The artifacts went from the vault to, where? He didn't keep them. The ledger doesn't show them in any location associated with Dumbledore. He moved them, Ron said. Same way whoever did the earlier ones moved them. To make sure they weren't in one place. To scatter them, Hermione said, and there was an edge in her voice, not anger exactly but the specific feeling of someone whose image of a trusted figure is being revised under pressure. So that no one could find them all. Because if no one could find them all, Harry said, and the heir didn't know they existed, then whatever he thought he was protecting by scattering them would stay protected. What was he protecting? Ron said. Harry thought about the Gringotts basin and the 4 colors of light and Ragnar's careful words about people who observed the same indicators and had every incentive to keep this discovery from occurring. A convergent founder's heir with 23 artifacts that, together, represented the full accumulated magical authority of all 4 founders of Hogwarts. That was a different proposition from any single powerful wizard, any single claim, any single lineage. That was something unprecedented, and unprecedented things were, to people who had built their understanding of the world on precedent, profoundly threatening. He was protecting the balance, Harry said. He thought if I had all of this, all 23, the heir status confirmed, the full picture, it would change things too much. Too fast. In ways he couldn't control. He paused. He wasn't stealing from me. He thought he was managing a situation that was too big for a child to handle. You're still a child, Ron said. I know, Harry said. But it's still mine. The castle was ahead, enormous against the grey sky, and Harry looked at it for a moment, the towers, the windows, the ancient stone, and felt the warmth of 5 artifacts in his bag with the clear, uncomplicated certainty that the remaining 18 were coming home too. All of them. However long it took. He thought about the Malfoy problem. Legally complex, Hermione had called it, and she was right, 3 artifacts technically transferred as gifts, chains of possession that had been deliberately constructed to look legitimate. You couldn't simply go to Malfoy Manor and take them back. Lucius Malfoy had lawyers, and political connections, and the specific skill of wealthy men in making legal problems expensive for the other party. But Harry had the Charter of 974. He had Gringotts. He had the heir certification. And now he had the provenance chain showing the original vault withdrawals, which predated any of the gift transfers. He also had, and this was the thing he kept returning to, an invitation he hadn't received yet but that he was going to force. The owl he sent to Lucius Malfoy that evening was brief, formal, and completely without ambiguity. Mr. Malfoy, my name is Harry Potter. I am the certified heir of the Potter family vault, as confirmed by Director Ragnar of Gringotts. The vault's heritage inventory identifies 3 items currently in your family's possession that were removed from the Potter vault without the heir's consent. These items are, Gryffindor's golden scales, Hufflepuff's earthstone bracelet, and Ravenclaw's ink of understanding. I would like to discuss their return at your convenience. I have attached copies of the relevant Gringotts documentation. Please respond within 7 days. Harry James Potter, heir, Potter family. He tied it to a Hogwarts owl, watched it go, and went back to his homework. The response came in 4 days. It arrived not by owl but by hand. A junior ministry official appeared at the school gates on Thursday afternoon with an envelope sealed in Malfoy green wax, which he handed to Professor McGonagall, who brought it to Harry during dinner with an expression that said she had questions she was currently choosing not to ask. Harry opened it at the table. Mr. Potter, I acknowledge receipt of your letter and the accompanying documentation. I am familiar with the items you describe and can confirm that the Malfoy family has held them for several decades in good faith. I would be happy to receive you at Malfoy Manor to discuss the matter further. Saturday next, at 2 o'clock, would be convenient. Please come alone. Lucius Malfoy, he wants you to come alone, Ron said, reading it over his shoulder. Yes, Harry said. Which is obviously a tactic. Obviously. Are you going alone? Harry considered it. The come alone was absolutely a power play. Malfoy wanted to manage the dynamic, present it as a private discussion between gentlemen rather than a formal claim proceeding. He wanted Harry without witnesses, without support, in Malfoy's own house on Malfoy's own terms. No, Harry said. I'm bringing Hermione. Not me. Ron said. You're coming too, Harry said. I'm just not going to tell Malfoy that. Malfoy Manor on a grey October Saturday was exactly what the name suggested, large, pale, built with the specific architectural vocabulary of people who had been wealthy and powerful for several centuries and wanted both facts communicated simultaneously. The iron gates at the end of the long drive were ornate in the way that says we commissioned this rather than we needed this, and the grounds between the gate and the house were immaculate in the specific way of places where other people do the work. Harry walked up the drive with Hermione at his shoulder and the Gringotts documents in his bag and the 5 recovered artifacts in the cloth at his hip, which he was carrying because he kept them close now, all of them, and nobody told him otherwise. Ron was under the invisibility cloak, 2 paces behind. The house elf who opened the door was visibly startled to see a 12-year-old on the steps. It recovered quickly and led them through an entrance hall that was exactly as cold and grand as it looked from the outside, up a short staircase and through a door into a drawing room that managed to be both very beautiful and deeply unwelcoming, which was a particular skill. Lucius Malfoy was standing by the window. Harry had seen him at the Quidditch World Cup in brief, managing glimpses, tall, pale, blonde hair worn long, the kind of physical authority that expensive clothes and high cheekbones will produce in a person who has never been given reason to doubt themselves. He looked at Harry the way he looked at most things, Harry suspected, with a careful assessment quickly followed by an expression of absolute ease that was itself a performance of power. Then he looked at Hermione. I asked you to come alone, he said. I brought my advisors, Harry said, sitting down without being invited to. We can start whenever you're ready. Something moved in Malfoy's expression, a flicker of recalculation, and then he sat too, across from Harry, in the chair clearly designated as his by its position relative to everything else in the room. He crossed one leg over the other and said, with the smooth reasonableness of a man who has conducted many difficult conversations in this room, the documentation you sent is impressive. Ragnar's seal carries weight. I have no interest in disputing the authenticity. Good, Harry said. What I do intend to discuss, Malfoy continued, is the question of good faith possession. The items in question were transferred to my family as gifts, freely given, by their previous owners. The Malfoy family received them lawfully. Whatever irregularities may have existed upstream, he spread his hands in a gesture of elegant detachment from anything upstream. They are not the Malfoy family's irregularities. Hermione had her notebook out. Section 8 of the Charter of 974 addresses this directly, she said, without preamble. Retroactive invalidation of asset transfers where the transferor lacked the authority to transfer. The individuals who gifted these items to your family were themselves in possession of stolen property, which means the transfer of title was void from the beginning regardless of the good faith of the recipient. She looked up. Good faith possession is not a defense against a primary heir claim. It can reduce the heir's recovery damages in certain circumstances, but it cannot defeat the claim itself. Malfoy looked at her with the expression adults sometimes gave Hermione when she produced legal analysis from thin air, a mixture of irritation and reluctant acknowledgement. He turned back to Harry. The items have been in my family for decades. They've been maintained for me, then, Harry said. That's generous. A slight tightening around Malfoy's eyes. I'm a reasonable man, Mr. Potter. I'm willing to discuss. I want the 3 artifacts returned, Harry said. The golden scales, the Earthstone bracelet, the ink of understanding. That's not a negotiation. That's the starting position and the ending position. He held Malfoy's gaze with the flat ease of someone who has decided this conversation has one possible conclusion. What I'm willing to discuss is how it happens. You can transfer them voluntarily, which looks cooperative and allows you to control the narrative around your family's possession of them. Or I file the Section 8 claim through Gringotts, which triggers a full audit of the Malfoy vault's contents against the Founder's heritage inventory, which, he paused, might reveal additional items of interest. The room was very quiet. Somewhere in the manor, a clock ticked. Malfoy's expression had not changed. But something had changed behind it. The quality of his stillness was different now, the stillness of a man who has picked up a chess piece and found that it's not the piece he thought it was. The audit threat, he said, carefully. You're suggesting there might be more than 3 items. I'm suggesting that a full audit would answer that question definitively, Harry said. I'd rather not trigger it. Audits are disruptive. Bad publicity. The kind of thing the prophet writes about. He let the implication sit for exactly as long as it needed to. The voluntary return is cleaner for everyone. Malfoy uncrossed his legs. He stood and walked to the window and looked out at the grey grounds with his hands clasped behind his back, and Harry watched him and did not fill the silence. Outside, the grounds were still and cold. The manor's peacocks were arranged along the far stone wall with the absurd decorative quality of everything at this address. These items, Malfoy said, to the window. You believe they're important. I know they are, Harry said. They're the Founder's work. They were made by people who built Hogwarts. They belong with the heir. And you intend to recover all 23. Not a question. Yes. Another pause. Malfoy turned from the window. His expression had shifted again, not cooperative, nothing as simple as that, but thoughtful in a way that his initial performance of ease hadn't been. The items the Ministry holds, he said quietly. You know about those. Some of them, Harry said. The Ministry is not, Malfoy said, a negotiating partner you'll find as tractable as a private citizen. He paused, and there was something in the pause that was not quite a warning but had warning adjacent to it, the specific caution of a man who knows more about a particular thing than he's saying. Fudge's Department of Mysteries has held artifacts of this type for 30 years. They consider it a matter of national security. They will not respond to a charter claim the way Gringotts would. Why are you telling me this? Harry asked. Malfoy looked at him. A long, assessing look, the kind that goes past the surface of things and tries to find the shape of what's underneath. Because I'm a practical man, he said. And I recognize when a situation is developing in a direction that exceeds my ability to influence it. He turned to the bell pull on the wall and rang it once. The 3 items will be brought from the vault. You'll have them within the hour. Harry absorbed the straightforwardness of this. That's it. You presented a sound legal argument and a credible threat, Malfoy said, with something that might have been dry respect. I'm not interested in a losing fight. I am interested in, he paused, choosing words carefully. The correct positioning for what comes next. What do you think comes next? Harry said. Malfoy looked at him. I think the heir of all 4 founders, with 23 artifacts recovered in Gringotts at his back, is going to reach a point where the wizarding establishment is going to have to decide whether to accommodate him or oppose him. And I think the people who oppose him are going to find it considerably more expensive than the people who do the opposite. A pause. That's not loyalty, Mr. Potter. I want to be clear about what it is. It's practicality, Harry said. Yes. No apology in it, no shame. Just the clean acknowledgement of what it was. Practicality. A different house elf appeared. It had a small wooden box, which it placed on the table in front of Harry. Malfoy nodded at it. Harry opened it. The 3 artifacts sat on dark velvet inside the box. The golden scales were exactly what their name suggested, small, precise, each pan the size of a large coin, the balance arm made of that not quite gold metal he'd come to associate with Gryffindor's work. The Earthstone bracelet was a band of interlocked stone segments in earthy deep colors, amber, brown, green, that sat warm in his palm with Hufflepuff's characteristic organic warmth, the feeling of something grown rather than made. The ink of understanding was a small sealed inkwell, deep blue glass, with Ravenclaw's seal pressed into the stopper's wax. When Harry held it, he felt the same clarity he'd felt with the mirror of thought, a sharpening of focus, a sense of thoughts made more legible to themselves. 8 artifacts. 15 to go. Thank you, Harry said. He closed the box and put it in his bag. Malfoy made a slight motion with his hand that might have been acknowledgement. The Ministry, he said, as Harry stood. Be careful of how you approach it. Fudge listens to certain people and ignores others. The people he listens to, he stopped. Some of them don't want the Founder artifacts acknowledged publicly. The existence of a convergent heir with valid claims to all 23 is inconvenient to certain arrangements. What arrangements? Malfoy looked at him for a moment. Come back when you've thought about what a convergent Founder's heir means for the governance of Hogwarts, he said. The school's charter grants specific authorities to the founding bloodlines. Authorities that currently rest with others. By default. By virtue of no heir being present. He let that sit. Think about what happens to those authorities when a living heir presents himself. He walked to the door of the drawing room and held it. The conversation was over. Harry walked out. Hermione fell into step beside him. Ron materialized from under the cloak in the entrance hall, which made the house elf make a sound like a kettle releasing pressure, and the 3 of them walked down the long drive in the grey afternoon air. Hogwarts governance, Hermione said, after about 20 feet. Yeah, Harry said. The founding charter gives the bloodline heirs certain authorities over the school, she said. Over the Board of Governors, over the headmaster position, over the curriculum. Her voice was doing the careful calculation thing. If you're the heir of all 4 founders, those authorities all converge in you. Which means whoever is currently exercising them by default, Ron started. Loses them, Harry said. Or has to acknowledge that they've been exercising them without legitimate authority. Dumbledore, Hermione said softly. Not just Dumbledore, but Dumbledore prominently among others. The governance of Hogwarts, the implicit authority that came from being the dominant wizarding institution's most powerful figure, the 30 years of managing a situation that was heading toward this exact point. He moved artifacts out of my vault, Harry said. He had accessed 1975 to 1979. He knew the theoretical possibility of the convergent heir existed. He scattered 4 artifacts, probably to make the full picture impossible to assemble quickly, if someone ever started looking. He was trying to delay this, Hermione said. Not delay it forever, Harry said. He's not that kind of man. He thought he'd control the timing. That he'd be the one to decide when I was ready, when it was safe, when the situation was managed enough to handle the revelation. He walked in silence for a moment. He was wrong about having that right. What are you going to do? Ron said. I'm going to get the rest of the artifacts, Harry said. The Ministry ones, the Codex, the others. I'm going to do it right, legally, with Gringotts behind me, so there's no angle to challenge it from. A pause. And then I'm going to call the Wisengamot heir claim that the charter provides for, and I'm going to do it in public, and anyone who has been operating as if the founder bloodlines had no living heir is going to have to account for that in front of everyone. Including Dumbledore, Ron said. Including Dumbledore. The gates of Malfoy Manor were behind them now. The road stretched ahead toward Hogsmeade, and the afternoon was cold and the sky was low, and Harry walked through it with 8 recovered artifacts in his bag and a shape forming in his mind that was more complete than it had been this morning, more complete every day, the image of a reckoning that was building like weather, slow, inevitable, gathering everything into itself as it came. They were back at the castle by 5. Hermione went immediately to the library. Ron went to dinner. Harry went to the 7th floor. He stood in front of the Room of Requirements corridor for a long time, not walking past it 3 times, not requesting anything, just standing there thinking. Then he sat down against the wall, right there in the corridor, and spread the ledger across his knees, and went through it from the beginning, slowly, the way you read something important, not for information this time but for pattern. 23 artifacts. 15 still missing. The Ministry held 4 with Ministry-grade shielding. The Codex was in Amsterdam, moving. The remaining 10 were scattered, some in private collections with partial location data, some entirely unaccounted for. Ragnarok had said, the 12 that are shielded from our detection, the magic is sophisticated enough that we have been unable to penetrate it. 12 shielded. For Ministry grade. That left 8 shielded by something else. Something sophisticated. Something that had been in place long enough that the goblin monitoring systems, which were ancient and thorough, couldn't penetrate it. What kind of magic lasted decades, stayed undetected by Gringotts monitoring, and had been applied to 8 artifacts simultaneously? He turned to the back section of the ledger, the part titled Technical Notations, Artifact Recovery, which he'd skimmed before and now read carefully. 3 pages in, a paragraph caught him. Note on detection resistance, 8 artifacts carry a shielding signature consistent with Fidelius adjacent enchantment, modified for object application rather than location application. A Fidelius charm used on objects rather than a place would render them effectively undetectable without the secret keeper's knowledge. The identity of the secret keeper is unknown. The applications were made between 1975 and 1980, consistent with the period of most significant vault disruption. Fidelius adjacent. Applied to objects. 1975 to 1980. The same period as Dumbledore's vault access. The same period as the vein chain's earliest movements. Harry closed the ledger. He sat in the corridor in the castle's quiet and thought about a man who had used one of the most powerful concealment charms in wizarding history on 8 stolen artifacts, who had scattered 4 others through a broker chain, who had known for 30 years that the convergent heir was theoretically possible and had spent 30 years managing the timeline of its revelation. The same man who had hidden a philosopher's stone in a school and called it a trap. The same man who had placed a baby on a doorstep and called it protection. The same man who, 4 days ago in this same castle, had admitted to knowing about the 3 Hogwarts artifacts and not told Harry. And had admitted to knowing where 2 of the Ministry-shielded artifacts might be and not told Harry. And had looked, across his desk, at Harry saying when you're ready to tell me, with the expression of a man who was not yet ready and had not decided whether he ever would be. Harry put the ledger in his bag. He stood up. He dusted off his robes. He did not go to Dumbledore's office. Not yet. That conversation needed to wait until he had everything, until the full picture was in his hands and the legal structure was complete, so that when he walked into that office there was no angle from which Dumbledore could reframe it as a situation that required management. What he did was go to the Ollery and write 2 letters. The first was to Ragnarok. I believe 8 artifacts carry a modified Fidelius charm, object applied, 1975 to 1980. If the secret keeper were to voluntarily reveal the locations, would the charms break? And if the secret keeper were compelled to do so through legal process, would that satisfy the Charter's recovery provisions? The second was to a name he'd gotten from Vane during the Gringotts meeting, written on a separate slip of paper that Vane had passed across the table at the end, and said, "If the codex is your most urgent concern, this person knows Fenchich's Amsterdam operation. She's not friendly. But she is practical. She responds to direct approaches." The name on the slip was, Sylvia Abernath, Portkey Regulation, Department of Magical Transportation, Ministry of Magic. A ministry employee. Who knew a black market artifact broker's Amsterdam safe house? Several parties, Vane had said of himself. Friend of several parties who would prefer discretion. The ministry artifacts, the Fidelius adjacent shielding, the ministry employee who knew the codex's location. It was all connecting in a way that suggested a single architecture, a coherent structure beneath the surface, and the structure had a ministry dimension that went considerably beyond 4 artifacts in the Department of Mysteries. He sent both owls and stood in the Olaris open windows while Hogwarts went dark around him, the grounds below lit by moving torchlight, the lake a black mirror. He thought about what Malfoy had said. The people who oppose him are going to find it considerably more expensive than the people who do the opposite. He thought about Dumbledore, and 8 objects wrapped in Fidelius adjacent concealment, and the long patience of a man who believed he knew better than everyone else what the right timing was. He thought about the Wisingamot heir claim, waiting at the end of this like a door he could see from here, the legal nuclear option, the public reckoning, the moment where the architecture of 30 years of careful management would be made visible to everyone. Not yet, he thought. A few more pieces first. Hedwig landed on his arm and he stroked her feathers absently, and she looked at him with the particular golden attention she gave him when she was assessing his state, which she did periodically with the proprietary concern of someone who had decided he was her specific responsibility. "I know," he said to her. "I'm fine." She nibbled his finger gently, which he chose to interpret as agreement. He went inside. Chapter 5, The Betrayal. The reply from Ragnarok arrived Monday morning with the weight of something that had been written carefully. "Mr. Potter, your analysis of the Fidelius adjacent enchantment is correct. We have confirmed this through our oldest detection protocols, which required some time to locate and apply, hence the delay in responding. To answer your questions directly, yes, voluntary disclosure by the secret keeper would break the concealment and render the artifacts immediately locatable. And yes, a legal compulsion through charter process would satisfy the recovery provisions, but only if the compulsion were issued by a Wisingamot panel with heir confirmation in hand, which requires the heir claim to already be filed. This creates a sequencing problem. You need the artifacts to file a complete heir claim, but you need the heir claim filed to legally compel the secret keeper. There is a third option, which we consider most viable. The secret keeper can choose voluntary disclosure without legal compulsion. The Charter's non-liability protection for cooperating parties extends to secret keepers in heir recovery cases, we checked. If the individual holding these secrets were to come forward willingly, they would be protected from prosecution for their role in the concealment. We believe you already know who the secret keeper is. We believe you have known for several days. The question is not identification, it is approach. Come to us when you are ready. The codex situation has developed. Fenchich moved it from Amsterdam 3 days ago. Current location, unknown, but still in Europe. The window is closing. Ragnarok. Harry read it twice, folded it, and set it beside his porridge. The codex was moving. That changed things. He looked up at the staff table. Dumbledore was eating with the serene attention he gave to most meals, occasionally exchanging words with McGonagall on his left, occasionally looking out at the hall with the warm, sweeping gaze of a man entirely at peace with his position. He didn't look toward Harry's table. Harry looked at him for exactly as long as he needed to, then looked away. "The codex," he said quietly to Hermione. She was already reading Ragnarok's letter, which she'd read simultaneously with Harry because that was how they worked now. "Fenchich moved it," she said. "Which means whoever bought it is getting nervous, they moved it earlier than planned. Either they heard about the auction recovery, or, they heard about me," Harry said. "Word travels. Black market community is smaller than it looks," Vane said. Wednesday's auction wasn't quiet. So the buyer accelerated the transfer, Hermione said. Which means we've lost the Amsterdam window. She turned a page in her notebook. I've been looking at Sylvia Abernath. She's been in Portkey regulation for 11 years. Clean record publicly. But, she showed him a page covered in cross-referenced notes. She's processed 17 Portkey authorizations in the last 2 years to destinations in mainland Europe that don't have corresponding arrival confirmations in the destination country's records. Which means either the Portkeys were never used, unlikely, given the authorization fees, or they were used to destinations that aren't officially registered. Black site Portkeys, Ron said, from around a piece of toast. Fred and George mentioned those once. Ministry employees who moonlight in the unauthorized transportation market. Moving objects or people without official logging. Or both, Hermione said. She knows where Fenchurch's operations are because she's been running the transport for him, Harry said. Presumably. Which means she knows where the codex went. Harry thought about the letter Vane had written on. She responds to direct approaches. He thought about Malfoy's practical recalculation in the drawing room. He thought about Vane's frightened eyes across the Gringotts table. Everyone in this chain, he was finding, had a threshold. A point where the calculation shifted, where the weight of what they were holding became heavier than the weight of letting it go. Vane's threshold had been frightened clients. Malfoy's had been the audit threat. Abernath's threshold would be something else. He needed to find it before the codex moved again. I need to see her, Harry said. Not by letter. In person. Hermione looked at him. She works at the ministry. I know. We're at Hogwarts. I know that too. A pause. Harry, you can't just walk into the Ministry of Magic. Can't I? Harry said. I have a Gringotts certification confirming my heir status. The Wizengamot has a public visitors gallery. Ministry of Magic employees are accessible through the Public Inquiries Office during normal business hours. He picked up his pumpkin juice. The ministry is a public institution. I'm a member of the public with a legal claim. Hermione opened her mouth. Also, Harry said, Hogsmeade weekend is Saturday. She closed her mouth. Considered. The flue from the 3 broomsticks goes to the leaky cauldron. The ministry is accessible from the phone box on. I know where the phone box is, Harry said. I read your notes from June. You read my notes from June. You left them on the table and wrote Harry should read these on the cover. That's fair, she said. He did not wait until Saturday. Thursday afternoon, while the castle was in the thick of its after-class period, homework, Quidditch practice, the social machinery of 500 students doing whatever 500 students do between 4 and dinner, Harry took the cloak, took the Gringotts token, and went. Ron came. Hermione came, which Harry had expected, with her notebook and her second copy of the documentation and an expression that communicated very clearly that she was doing this under protest and also that no force in the known world could have kept her away. The flue, the leaky cauldron, Muggle London in October with its grey skies and its purposeful foot traffic, the phone box on the corner of a street that looked ordinary until you understood what it contained. Harry dialed the number, set his name and purpose into the receiver, Harry Potter, legal consultation regarding a Gringotts heir claim, and the 3 of them descended. The Ministry of Magic at 3:30 on a Thursday had the quality of an institution at working capacity, not frantic, not quiet, the medium hum of a large organization doing its regular business. The atrium was high-ceilinged and bustling, the golden fountain of magical brethren in the center with its figures mid-gesture, witches and wizards moving in the purposeful patterns of people who have somewhere to be. Nobody paid particular attention to 3 Hogwarts students walking through the atrium with the certainty of people who belong there. Harry had found, over the past months, that certainty was its own kind of camouflage. People looked twice at hesitation, not at confidence. The directory listed the Department of Magical Transportation on level 6. They took the lift. Portkey Regulation was a suite of offices behind a frosted glass door, staffed by perhaps 20 people working at desks covered in the particular density of paper that regulatory departments accumulate. A receptionist looked up when they came in. "We're here to see Sylvia Abernath," Harry said. "Tell her it's Harry Potter. Tell her it's about Fenchurch." The receptionist looked at him with the expression of someone who has been trained to manage people but is currently outside the scope of that training. She picked up an inter-office messaging quill, wrote something, sent it, and looked back at them with professional neutrality. They waited 90 seconds. Then a door at the back of the office opened and a woman came through it quickly, closing it behind her, and stood looking at them with an expression that Harry recognized immediately. Threshold reached. Sylvia Abernath was perhaps 45, dark-haired, with the kind of face that was very good at looking composed and was currently working quite hard at it. She was wearing ministry robes with a level 6 badge and carrying nothing, which was the posture of someone who had heard a name and come out without stopping to think about whether she needed anything else. She looked at Harry, then at Ron, then at Hermione. Then back at Harry. "Not here," she said quietly. "Conference room. Now." The conference room was small and had a privacy ward that Abernath applied before she'd fully sat down, which told Harry everything he needed to know about her assessment of the situation. She sat across from them and laced her fingers on the table and said, "How do you know that name?" "Cassius Vane," Harry said. "He gave me yours." Something moved across her face. "Vane," she said, with a flatness that contained a considerable number of opinions about Cassius Vane. "Of course he did. You've been running unauthorized portkeys for Fenchurch's operation," Harry said. "European destinations without registered arrival points. I'm not here to report that to your department." He held her gaze. "I'm here because Fenchurch moved the Slytherin Codex 3 days ago and I need to know where it went." Abernath looked at him for a long time. The composed face was doing real work now. He could see the calculation happening in real time, the same calculation he'd watched Vane go through across the Gringotts table, the same essential question, is what I'm holding worth more than what I'm being offered? "The Codex," she said. "You know what that is." "I know exactly what it is," Harry said. "It's a book written by Salazar Slytherin containing the original frameworks for several branches of advanced magic. It belongs to my family. I have the documentation." He produced the certification and laid it on the table. "The buyer is going to find, when they receive it, that they've purchased something they can't use publicly, can't sell publicly, and can't return without acknowledging how they obtained it. The only person who can make any of that go away is me." A pause. "And I will, for whoever helps me get it back. The Charter's cooperating witness protection applies to you." "You're 12 years old," she said. "People keep bringing that up," Harry said. "It doesn't change the legal position." A long pause. She looked at the certification, read it with the focused speed of someone familiar with legal documents, looked back up. "Fenchurch moved it to a collection facility in Vienna," she said. "A private museum, technically. Storage of significant magical objects. The buyer arranged for it to go there temporarily before final delivery." She paused. "Final delivery is scheduled for the 15th. Next Tuesday." "Tuesday. 5 days." "The buyer," Harry said. "Argentum. Do you know who it is?" Abernath hesitated. It was the first real hesitation she'd shown, not the composed resistance from before, but something that looked like genuine uncertainty about whether to say it. "I have a name," she said. "From the transport authorization. The final delivery address." She looked at the certification again, as if making sure the protection was real. "Thaddeus Knott." Harry didn't know the name. He filed it, looked at Hermione. Hermione's expression said she did know the name, and that it was significant, and that she was going to have opinions about it as soon as they were out of this room. "The Vienna facility," Harry said. "Do you have the address?" Abernath reached into her robes, produced a card, slid it across the table. The portkey authorization I wrote for the codex's transport, it's in the system as a standard object transfer. If you use it as a tracking reference, you can get the exact facility location from the arrival log. She looked at Harry. You didn't get that from me. We got it from Ragnarok, Harry said easily, which was not true but was the kind of not true that protected her and was therefore the right kind. Thank you. She nodded, once, with the look of someone who has put down something heavy and is not yet sure how they feel about the lightness. They were back in the atrium and moving toward the exit when Harry's ear caught something that stopped him. Potter Boy has been moving through the artifact chain faster than anyone anticipated. He stopped walking. The voice came from a cluster of robes near the fountain, two men and a woman in conversation, half turned away, speaking at the low volume of people who consider themselves private in a public space. Ragnarok's backing him fully. There's no legal angle, the heir claim, if he files it, the school governance provisions alone, Dumbledore knows. He's been informed. They moved away, following the foot traffic, their voices dropping below hearing distance. Harry stood still for 3 seconds. Then he walked to the lifts, pressed the button for level 1, and when the lift opened he stepped in. Ron said, "That's not the way out." "I know," Harry said. "Level 1 is the minister's office." "I know that too." A pause. "Harry, I want to see who's being informed," Harry said. "I want to know who those people are and what meeting they just came from." He pressed the button. 2 minutes. Level 1 was different from Level 6, quieter, more deliberate, the corridors wider and the lighting more formal. The doors here had nameplates in gold rather than brass. Harry walked them quickly, reading names he half recognized from newspaper stories: Senior Undersecretary, Junior Minister, Special Advisor. And at the end of the corridor, partially open, a door through which voices were audible. Harry stopped outside it, not hiding, not listening at the keyhole, just standing in the corridor where anyone could see him and could hear, because the door was open and the voices were not whispered. If he files the Wizengamot claim, the governance provisions trigger automatically. There's no procedural block, there's the age question. He's a minor. The heir claim has an age of majority provision, the charter overrides it. Ragnarok confirmed the override in the 974 text, it's in there, then we have no legal block. A third voice, older, carrying the specific weight of authority. What we have is a political problem. A 12-year-old boy with a goblin banking compact, claiming governance authority over Hogwarts and hereditary standing in the Wizengamot, 1 week before the term's end of term, he's not waiting for term's end. A pause. How close is he to the full 23? 8 recovered. The codex is moving. The Vienna can be handled. The Fidelius artifacts are the problem. If Dumbledore doesn't, the voices dropped, suddenly, as if someone in the room had registered the open door or the quiet of the corridor outside it. Harry was already 3 steps back and moving normally, the way you move when you have every right to be somewhere and have simply changed direction. He reached the lifts, pressed the button, and when the doors opened he stepped in with Ron and Hermione and pressed the atrium button. The lift descended. "They know about Vienna," Ron said. "Yes." "And about the Fidelius artifacts." "Yes." "And someone in that room has the authority to handle Vienna." Ron's voice was steady, doing the thing it did when he was being deliberately calm because the situation required it. "Which means if we don't move on Vienna before they do, the codex disappears," Harry said. "Properly this time. Into a private collection with ministry cover, and we never see it again." The atrium arrived. They walked out through the Golden Hall with its fountain and its purposeful traffic and out through the phone box and into the grey London afternoon, and Harry's mind was running very fast through a sequence of if-thens that was accelerating. "Tuesday," Hermione said. "Final delivery is Tuesday. Today is Thursday. We have 5 days." 4.5, Harry said. "Vienna," Ron said. "We're going to Vienna." "We're going to Vienna," Harry confirmed. We're in school, Hermione said. Hogsmeade weekend is Saturday, Harry said. The Floo can get us to London. A portkey can get us to Vienna. Ragnarok can arrange the portkey, he has authority to issue them under the Charter for Air Recovery Operations. That's, Hermione stopped, clearly running through the Charter provisions. That's actually in Section 6. The bank can authorize air-related international travel. I know, Harry said. I read Section 6. When? Tuesday. In the bath. A pause. You need to stop reading legal documents in the bath, Harry. It's where I do my best thinking. I don't know what to do with that information. But she was writing in her notebook already, the pen moving fast, and her expression had the sharp focus of someone who has a timeline and intends to meet it. He wrote to Ragnarok from the castle that evening. The reply came at dawn Friday, portkey authorized. 3 passengers. Saturday departure from Hogsmeade, 11 a.m. Vienna arrival, local noon. Gringotts has a Vienna agent, Magda Graf, who will meet you at the collection facility's public entrance. The facility is registered as the Viennese Cabinet of Magical Curiosities. Public Museum. The private storage is below ground. Magda knows the layout. There is one complication. The ministry is also moving on Vienna. We intercepted an owl late last night, the details are not important, but someone with ministry authority has dispatched an agent to the facility. Their arrival time is uncertain but likely Saturday afternoon. You will need to be out with the codex before then. Harry folded the letter, made coffee in the Gryffindor common room's small side alcove that had a kettle, a discovery from first year that remained his most practically useful Hogwarts revelation, and sat in the early morning quiet thinking. A ministry agent going to Vienna. On someone's authority. Someone in that Level 1 meeting who had the power to dispatch ministry personnel internationally on short notice, who knew about the codex, and who wanted to get there before Harry did. He thought about the conversation he'd heard, Dumbledore knows. He's been informed. The ministry had told Dumbledore what Harry was doing. Or Dumbledore had told the ministry. The direction of information was unclear, but the connection was not. He heard Ron come down the stairs from the dormitory, and Hermione from the girls' staircase, and he poured them both coffee without asking. They'd all developed the early morning ritual of the common room alcove in the past few weeks, drawn there by the work and the conversation and the particular intimacy of plans made before the rest of the castle was awake. Ministry agent going to Vienna Saturday afternoon, he said. They both sat. Ron took the coffee. Hermione put her notebook on the table. How? Ron said. They were monitoring the artifact chain. Probably have been since the auction. He paused. Or someone told them. The fire crackled. The common room was quiet and red golden around them. Someone inside Hogwarts, Hermione said. Her voice was careful, precise, the way it got when she was saying something she didn't want to say. Someone who knew about Vienna, knew about Abernath, about Fenchurch, and told the ministry before we could act on it. We only knew about Vienna yesterday afternoon, Ron said. We were at the ministry yesterday. We came straight back. We wrote to Ragnarok yesterday evening. He looked at Harry. The only people who knew what we learned yesterday are, the 3 of us, Harry said. And Ragnarok. A pause. And Dumbledore. You didn't tell Dumbledore, Ron said. No, Harry said. But Ragnarok might have. Ragnarok communicates with Hogwarts administration on certain matters, it's in the charter compact between the school and the bank. He wouldn't have thought it was a secret. Or Dumbledore has other eyes, Hermione said quietly. Harry looked at her. He's the headmaster, she said. He's been here for decades. He knows this castle better than anyone. He has portraits, house elf networks, magical monitoring systems he's built over 30 years. She met Harry's eyes. We've been planning and moving and writing letters and going to Gringotts and visiting Malfoy Manor. If Dumbledore wanted to know what we were doing, he had tools. The fire popped. Outside the common room windows, the sky was beginning to lighten in the east, the very first grey edge of dawn. Then he's known for a while, Harry said. Yes, Hermione said. And he's been waiting, Harry said. Letting us move, watching what we found, and when we got close to something he couldn't let go, the Codex, something with genuine power, he moved to intercept it. Not to keep it from you, Hermione said, and her voice was not excusing it but trying to be accurate. To keep control of the timing. He doesn't want you to have it until he decides you're ready for, I know, Harry said. I know what he thinks he's doing. He stood up, went to the window, looked out at the lightning grounds. He moved artifacts out of my vault. He applied Fidelius-adjacent concealment to 8 others. He's been managing this for 30 years. And when I started recovering them anyway, he let me, because the early recoveries were the ones he'd already decided I could have. The ones inside the school, the ones from Malfoy, the black market ones. He turned from the window. The Codex is different. The Codex is Slytherin's original magical theory. Whatever's in it, whatever original frameworks it contains, it's not just valuable. It's transformative. And he's afraid of what it changes if I have it. What does it change? Ron said. Harry thought about Malfoy's careful words in the drawing room. Think about what happens to those authorities when a living heir presents himself. About the level 1 voices, the governance provisions trigger automatically. About Ragnarok's patient, waiting satisfaction every time Harry recovered another artifact. Everything, he said. All of it. The Wizengamot heir claim, the school governance provisions, the entire architecture of who has authority over what in British magical society, it all becomes live the moment I have the full 23 and file the claim. And the Codex is the most significant single artifact in the set. He paused. With the Codex, the claim isn't just legal. It's historical. It's foundational. Slytherin's original magical theory in the hands of the heir of all 4 founders, filed publicly with the Wizengamot, is a statement that can't be unmade. The common room was very quiet. He can't let you have that, Hermione said softly. Not until he's sure he can manage what it triggers. No, Harry said. He can't. He came back to the table. Which is why we're going to Vienna on Saturday morning, and we're going to be out with the Codex before his agent arrives, and we're going to come back and have a conversation with Dumbledore that has been a long time coming. He sat. All right. Let's plan the rest of it. Saturday. Hogsmeade was cold and bright, one of those October days that looked warmer than it was, the sky a clean winter preview blue above the village rooftops. They'd signed out for the weekend through the normal channels. Hogsmeade visits for second years had been permitted by McGonagall with a brief, sharp look at Harry that said she noticed things and was choosing, for reasons of her own, not to press on them. The port key was a copper ring, waiting for them at the Gringotts Hogsmeade branch inside a small wooden box, alongside a note from Ragnarok that said, "Activate at 11. Magda will be at the museum's east entrance with a yellow scarf. Do not be late." At 11 on the dot, 3 hands on a copper ring, and the world lurched sideways in the particular vertical then horizontal tumble of port key travel, and then stone beneath their feet and cold European air and the sounds of a city going about it Saturday. Vienna was beautiful in October. Harry noticed this in the way you notice something when you have limited time for it, a quick, genuine impression of old buildings and wide streets and the particular quality of autumn light in a city that has been a city for a very long time. He didn't stop to appreciate it because they had a deadline, but he noticed it. Magda Groff was a small, square-shouldered goblin woman with a yellow scarf and an expression of professional seriousness that reminded Harry of Ragnarok in miniature. She greeted them at the east entrance of a building that looked like a private museum, stone facade, discreet signage, the tasteful understatement of somewhere that wanted serious visitors rather than casual ones. "Mr. Potter," she said. "Good. You're on time." She looked at Ron and Hermione with brief assessment. "These are your advisors?" "Yes," Harry said. Good. Follow me. The private storage access is through the main gallery to the lower staircase. The codex is in storage room 4, I have the room number from the transport authorization. We have approximately, she checked something on a pocket instrument. 2 hours before any complications arrive. We'll be out in 1, Harry said. She looked at him with a slight adjustment in expression. You haven't seen the building yet. Lead the way, Harry said. We'll see it as we go. The museum was small and extraordinary, glass cases of magical objects behind preservation charms, the walls hung with tapestries that moved with the comfortable slowness of very old enchantments, the air carrying the particular clean smell of stone and old magic. Harry walked through it quickly, not browsing, following Magda's efficient path through the main gallery and down a staircase that dropped below street level into a basement corridor lit by the same smokeless torches he'd seen at Gringotts. Storage room 4 was the second-to-last door on the right. Magda held up a hand at the door. There's a standard magical lock and a basic security ward. The ward is designed to alert the curator if the room is entered without authorization. She looked at Harry. Your air authority may override it. It may not, this is not your country, and the ward may not recognize the charter. Can you disable it? Harry asked. I can disable the lock, Magda said. The ward requires the room's registered owner to revoke it, or, she paused. Or the presence of the artifact's true owner, which the ward might recognize if your connection to the object is strong enough. Harry put his hand on the door. The warmth was immediate, the strongest he'd felt yet, a heat that traveled from his palm to his elbow in the first second, more intense than the Nocturne Alley artifacts, more urgent than the Hogwarts ones. The codex knew exactly where it was relative to him and was making very sure he knew it too. The ward didn't trigger. The door opened. The storage room was the size of a large wardrobe, shelved on 3 sides, holding objects in various states of careful preservation, items in cases, items wrapped in protective cloth, items sealed in stasis. The codex was on the middle shelf of the left wall, in a glass case, and it was the only thing in the room that was glowing. It was smaller than Harry had imagined, the size of a large book but with the density of something considerably more massive, its cover a deep green that was almost black, embossed with a serpent in the same style as Slytherin's seal, and the pages visible through the glass case were filled with handwriting that was clearly old but utterly legible, each letter precise and deliberate and carrying the quality Harry had come to associate with the founder's work, something made with absolute intention. He took the case off the shelf, opened it, and picked the codex up. The warmth was complete. Not heat, completion. The feeling of a circuit closing, of something that had been circuit broken for a very long time suddenly finding its other terminal. He held it and felt, clearly and without confusion, all 8 of the Fidelius adjacent artifacts shift, not in a way he could have pointed to on a map, but in the way you feel a change in air pressure, a distant recognition. 9, Ron said quietly. 9 down. Not quite, Harry said. He was still holding the codex, feeling the circuit connection. The Fidelius artifacts. I can feel them now. He looked at his hands on the codex's cover. The codex is connected to them. Whatever Dumbledore did to conceal those 8, the codex is the keystone. It's what the concealment is anchored to. Hermione looked at him sharply. If the codex is the anchor, then whoever holds the codex can break the concealment, Harry said. That's why he wanted it. Not just for what it contains. For what it unlocks. He didn't want it for himself, Hermione said, working through it rapidly. He couldn't hold it, it belongs to the air, it would never work properly for him. He wanted to keep it away from you. Because as long as you didn't have it, the 8 Fidelius artifacts stayed hidden, Harry said. And without them, the heir claim wasn't complete. And without the complete heir claim, he looked at the codex. The governance provisions never triggered. The Wisengamot standing never activated. Everything stayed exactly as it has been for 30 years. The storage room was silent. He built a lock, Ron said. And the codex is the key. Yes, Harry said. He wrapped the codex in the cloth from his bag, settled it with the others, and turned to Magda. We need to go. They went. They were back in the museum gallery, moving toward the exit, when Harry stopped. The man coming through the main entrance doors was Ministry. Harry could see it in the robes, the badge, the particular professional purposefulness of someone on an official errand. He was perhaps 30, dark-robed, and he was looking at a piece of paper and then at the gallery and then, as he looked up, directly at Harry. The moment lasted 2 seconds. Potter, the man said. Hi, Harry said. You need to come with me. I don't think I do, Harry said pleasantly. He had the codex in his bag and 8 other artifacts with it and Ragnarok's charter authorization in his pocket, and he was standing in a foreign country where the Ministry of Magic had no jurisdiction over the heir of all 4 British founders operating under a goblin banking compact. He knew this because Hermione had spent Thursday evening reading the international jurisdiction provisions of the charter and had underlined the relevant passage 3 times in red ink and made him read it with her. I'm here on authority of the British Ministry, the agent started. The British Ministry has no authority over me in Vienna, Harry said. I'm here on a Gringotts authorized heir recovery operation under the Charter of 974. The artifact I came for is my property by primary heir claim. I've retrieved it. He indicated the exit. I'm leaving now. The agent stepped forward. Magda stepped sideways in a way that wasn't quite blocking him but occupied a position that would make progress complicated, with the calm assurance of a goblin banker who knows exactly where the legal lines are and is standing directly on them. Mr. Potter, the agent said, and his voice had changed, dropped the official note, gone somewhere more personal. The person who sent me, they're trying to protect you. That's all this has ever been about. Harry looked at him. The agent's expression was genuine, Harry thought. He believed what he was saying. He believed he was representing someone's sincere intention. I know, Harry said. Tell them thank you. Tell them I understand the intention. He picked up his bag. And tell them the protection ends now. He walked out through the museum's front doors into the Vienna afternoon. Ron and Hermione followed. Magda came last, and the doors swung closed behind them. The portkey back was scheduled for 2 o'clock. They had 40 minutes, and Vienna was beautiful, and Harry stood on the stone steps of the museum and breathed cold Austrian air and felt the weight of 9 artifacts in his bag and the particular sensation of the 8 Fidelius concealed objects somewhere in Britain, connected to the codex he was carrying, their locations flowing toward him like magnetic north flows toward a compass. He knew where all 8 were. It was that simple. Holding the codex, he simply knew, not as coordinates, but as certainty. 3 were at Hogwarts, in rooms he hadn't known existed. 2 were in the Department of Mysteries. 2 were in private residences. 1 was in a vault at Gringotts that wasn't the Potter vault, a vault he didn't recognize by number, but that he'd identify when he saw it. 17 found. 6 to go. He sat on the museum steps with Hermione on his left and Ron on his right, and ate the sandwiches Hermione had made before they left because Hermione always brought food on missions and Harry had stopped pretending this wasn't the single most practically valuable thing about having her along. When we get back, Ron said, we're going to Dumbledore. Tonight, Harry said. Are you? Ron paused. Are you angry? Harry thought about it seriously. I'm clear, he said. I'm not angry. I was, a little, when Ragnarok first told me about the vault access. But he made decisions about my life that weren't his to make. For reasons he thought were good. He was wrong about the right. He wasn't wrong about caring. He picked up his sandwich. That doesn't make it acceptable. But it makes it something I can walk into a room with. Without losing it, Ron said. Without losing it, Harry confirmed. Good, Ron said, eating. Because I feel like that conversation is going to need precision. It is, Harry said. Hermione was looking out at the Vienna street, at the Saturday afternoon traffic of a city that didn't know it had 3 British schoolchildren sitting on museum steps with 9 stolen founders' artifacts in a bag between them, and she said, quietly, "He's going to tell you he did it for you. He's going to be entirely sincere." "I know," Harry said. "And some part of it will be true," she said. "I know that too," Harry said. "That's the complicated part." They sat in the autumn Vienna afternoon, and the city went about it Saturday, and at 2 o'clock they stood up and activated the port key and were gone. He went to Dumbledore's office at 7 that evening. He didn't use the password this time. He stood at the bottom of the moving staircase and said, clearly, "Professor Dumbledore. I need to speak with you." The staircase extended without the gargoyle moving, which told him Dumbledore had already disengaged it, had been expecting him, had possibly been expecting him all day. He went up. The office was the same as always, except that the silver instruments on the side table had been stilled, not turned off but quieted, the way you quiet music when a conversation is about to require full attention. Fawkes was fully renewed today, plumage brilliant, and he watched Harry come in with those old golden eyes that had seen more history than the portraits. Dumbledore was at his desk. He looked tired, which Harry hadn't seen before, not physically tired but the weariness of a man who has been carrying something and knows the carrying is about to end. "You went to Vienna," Dumbledore said. "Yes," Harry said. He sat down. He didn't put the codex on the desk. "Your agent was there. He was meant to arrive before you." "I know." Harry looked at him steadily. "I have the codex. And holding it, I can feel all 8 of the Fidelius concealed artifacts. I know where they are." A pause. "All 17. 17 down, 6 to go, and the 6 remaining I can find now with or without your help." He held Dumbledore's gaze. "But I'd like your help." Dumbledore was quiet. "You had access to my family vault from 1975 to 1979, Harry said. You removed 4 artifacts. You applied Fidelius-adjacent concealment to 8 others across various locations. You anchored the concealment to the codex, so that anyone who managed to trace the artifacts would hit a wall they couldn't pass without it." He paused. "You knew I was theoretically the convergent heir. You didn't want me to know that until you decided it was safe, and you built a structure to control the timing." Another pause. "Tell me why." Dumbledore was quiet for another moment. Then he took off his spectacles, set them on the desk, and rubbed his eyes with the gesture Harry had seen before, the one that looked human. "Do you know what the wizarding world does with unprecedented power?" he said. "What it has always done, throughout every era of history I have studied and lived through." He looked at Harry directly, without the spectacles, and his eyes were very old and very blue and more naked than Harry had seen them. "It destroys it. Or it corrupts it. Or it consumes the person carrying it from the inside out. Every time." He paused. "You are 12 years old, Harry. You have survived things that would break adults. You have courage that is, genuine, not performed, not manufactured by circumstance. You are, in many ways, the most remarkable child I have encountered in 60 years of teaching." Another pause, longer. "But what you are claiming is not just a legal inheritance. It is an authority that will change the entire structure of British wizarding society. And I am not, certain that claiming it at 12, under the circumstances you currently face, is safe for you." "That's not your decision," Harry said. "No," Dumbledore said. "It isn't." He said it simply, without equivocation, and the simplicity of it meant more than any defense would have. "It was never my decision. I knew that. I told myself the timing was protective, but the truth is," he stopped. "The truth is that I'm afraid of what you carry. Not of you. Of what the world will do to you when it fully understands what you are. I have watched power destroy things I loved. I am very old, and I have very few things I love left, and one of them is your continued existence and well-being." The room was quiet. Fawkes made a low sound that was somehow both music and sympathy. Harry looked at the old man across the desk, at the extraordinary intelligence and genuine love and profound wrongness of what he'd done, and he felt something settle in him that wasn't forgiveness exactly but was the thing that precedes forgiveness, the understanding of the full shape of it. "I know," Harry said. "I know you're afraid for me. I know you love me, in the way that you love people, from a distance, behind management, with the best intentions." He paused. "But you moved things from my family's vault. You made decisions about my inheritance without my knowledge or consent, for 12 years, because you decided you were the right person to decide that. And the world that results from that is a world where I'm always slightly less than I should be, always slightly behind the information, always waiting for someone to decide I'm ready." He held Dumbledore's eyes. "I'm not waiting anymore." A long silence. The kind that comes when something important has been said and both people in the room need to let it be said. "The 8 Fidelius artifacts," Harry said. "I can find them without you. But it would be faster and cleaner with your help. I want to be clear, I don't need it. But I'm asking for it." A pause. "As something you could do to be right about this, now, when you can." Dumbledore looked at him for a long moment. The old blue eyes held something that moved and settled, the interior weather of a man working through something genuinely difficult. Then he reached into his desk drawer and produced a piece of parchment that he laid on the desk. "The locations," he said. "All 8. I wrote them down 3 days ago, when it became clear you'd find the codex regardless." Harry looked at the parchment. Then at Dumbledore. "You wrote them down 3 days ago," Harry said. "Before Vienna." "Yes." "You were going to give them to me." "Yes." A pause. "Eventually." He stopped. "When I ran out of excuses not to." Harry picked up the parchment. He unfolded it and looked at 8 locations, written in the familiar cramped precision of Dumbledore's hand, and the locations matched exactly what he'd felt through the codex, every single one. He folded it and put it in his pocket. "Thank you," he said. He stood. At the door, he stopped and turned back one more time. "The Wisengamot heir claim," he said. "I'm filing it. Within the week. The governance provisions will trigger. There will be changes." He held Dumbledore's gaze. "I'm not filing it to take anything from you. I'm filing it because it's right and because it's mine and because it should have happened a long time ago." A pause. "Whatever changes, I'm not your enemy." Dumbledore looked at him for a long moment. Then something moved in his expression that was very old and very honest. "I know," he said quietly. "I've always known you'd be extraordinary. I simply forgot, for a time, that extraordinary things should not be kept in boxes." Harry went down the moving staircase. Below him, the castle was enormous and old and full of history that was also his history, the corridors warm with torchlight, the portraits talking in their evening voices, the whole ancient structure of it continuing as it always had. He had 9 artifacts in his bag. 8 more locations in his pocket. 6 others still to find. The heir claim was 5 days away. He went to find Hermione. Chapter 6, The Reckoning. The 8 Fidelius artifacts came home in 3 days. Not without effort, 3 of them were at Hogwarts in rooms that required the Codex's resonance to open, sealed chambers that hadn't been accessible since the 1970s, their doors indistinguishable from solid stone until Harry walked toward them and the Codex in his bag began its now familiar warmth that was more than warmth and the stone simply admitted him. The first was in a sealed antechamber off the 3rd floor corridor, a room 12 feet square, empty except for Hufflepuff's weaving loom, a small hand loom of dark wood that produced cloth with properties Harry didn't yet understand but that Hermione had gone slightly breathless reading about in the ledger. The second was 2 floors below the library, in a space that had once been, based on its layout, a study room of some kind, Gryffindor's battle standard, a banner of red gold silk that responded to Harry's hands by unfurling slowly to its full length and glowing with the particular crimson of Gryffindor's house color, except deeper, older, like the color had been there before the house was named for it. The third was above the Great Hall, in a space accessible only through a passage the Marauder's map had always shown as a dead end, Ravenclaw's star chart, a rolled parchment of the night sky as it had looked from Hogwarts in the 10th century, with annotations in Ravenclaw's handwriting that moved when you looked at them, updating the stellar positions in real time. 12 artifacts. 11 to go. Then 10. Then 9. The two Department of Mysteries artifacts required a different approach and considerably more paperwork, which Hermione handled with the focused energy of someone who had been waiting for a bureaucratic problem to solve. The Charter of 974 had a provision for ministry-held artifacts. It was narrow, technical, and almost certainly had not been invoked in living memory, but it was there. A formal heir demand served on the relevant department head, with Gringotts certification attached, triggering a mandatory review period of 48 hours before the ministry was legally required to either return the items or file a counterclaim through the Wisengamot. They won't file a counterclaim, Hermione said, preparing the documentation at the common room table at midnight on the second day. A counterclaim would require them to publicly argue that the ministry has a better claim to founder artifacts than the certified heir, which would be a disaster, Ron said. Legally and publicly, yes. She signed her name as witness to Harry's signature and blew on the ink. They'll return them. They just need the formal process to make it look like a considered decision rather than a capitulation. Give them that, Harry said. Already built into the language, Hermione said. The formal demand gives them the option to describe the return as an act of institutional cooperation with the heir's claim. No admission of wrongdoing. She looked up. Is that too generous? Harry thought about the level 1 voices, the ministry agent in Vienna, the 4 artifacts held behind ministry-grade shielding for decades. He thought about what Malfoy had said about the Department of Mysteries and National Security. It's accurate, he said. They didn't steal them the way the early movements were stolen. They collected them in the belief that they were preserving them. The belief was wrong, but the intention was complicated. He paused. Generous enough to get the artifacts back without a fight. Not so generous that anyone gets to pretend it was fine. Hermione nodded and added one sentence to the letter's final paragraph that did exactly that, with the precision of a person who understood the difference between diplomacy and capitulation. The artifacts arrived at Gringotts within the 48-hour window, as predicted, Slytherin's Shadow Glass and Gryffindor's Lion Clasp, both in excellent preservation, both responding to Harry's hands with the recognition he'd come to expect. Shadow Glass was a mirror that showed not your reflection but your intention, and holding it, Harry saw not himself but a clear image of the Wisengamot chamber, the hearing room, the moment of the public claim. He set it down without analyzing the vision further. It could keep. The lion clasp was smaller than he'd imagined, a brooch in the shape of a rearing lion, the size of a large coin, and when he pinned it to his robes it became immediately invisible, which Hermione identified as a concealment property from her restricted section research. The clasp concealed whatever its wearer chose to conceal, not physically but perceptually, making important things unremarkable to those without the wit to look directly. 16 recovered. 7 to go. The private residences were next, 2 locations on Dumbledore's parchment, both of them families Harry didn't know by name but that Ragnarok identified as minor wizarding families who had received artifacts as wedding gifts and estate inheritances over the previous century. Both families, when contacted by Gringotts on Harry's behalf with the formal heir demand, responded within 24 hours. One family sent a letter that was so apologetic it went on for 3 pages. They'd had no idea, they were mortified, they were delighted to return the items, please would Mr. Potter accept their sincere respects. The other family sent a letter of 2 sentences that communicated the same essential information without the elaboration. Slytherin's Venom Vial and Hufflepuff's Harvest Key arrived at Gringotts on the 4th day, and Harry collected them on Thursday evening after classes, standing at the heir's desk while Ragnarok, for the first time since their initial meeting, smiled. It was a small smile. Goblin smiles were not elaborate. But it was genuine. 18 recovered. 5 to go. The last 5 were the ones without location data, the artifacts Ragnarok had described as unaccounted for, not shielded but simply unfound, their trail cold since the early 20th century. Harry had been working through the ledger's historical notes on these 5 with increasing focus, and Hermione had been doing the same in parallel, and on Friday morning she came to breakfast with the expression of someone who had been awake since 4 a.m. because something wouldn't let her sleep. "I found them," she said. "All 5?" Harry said. "All 5. She sat and opened her notebook to a page so dense with annotations it looked like a code. 3 of them are at Hogwarts. Not hidden, just uncatalogued. They've been sitting in the castle for a century in places that nobody identified them because nobody knew what they were." She turned the notebook. "Gryffindor's warming stone, it's in the trophy room. I went in there for a reference last year and there's a small amber stone on the 3rd shelf that isn't associated with any trophy. It's been there long enough to collect dust. Ravenclaw's translation lens, it's in the library. In the reference section. It looks like a magnifying glass and it's been in the reference tools collection, used by students for reading old texts, for approximately," she checked her notes, "60 years. It's been in the library," Ron said. "Available for general student use," Hermione said, with the particular expression of someone confronting an irony too large to properly react to. "I've used it. Twice. It makes old writing readable. I thought it was just a standard academic tool." A pause. "The 3rd one is Slytherin's speaking stone, it's in the headmaster's office. In Dumbledore's personal collection of interesting objects." She looked at Harry. "He has it on his desk. I saw it when I was returning a book in 1st year. Small black stone, smooth, slightly oval. I noticed it because it seemed warm despite not being near the fire. He uses it as a paperweight." The table was quiet. "He knows what it is," Harry said. "Obviously," Hermione said. "He didn't list it on Dumbledore's parchment," Ron said. "He gave us 8 locations and not this one. He gave us the 8 he was keeping hidden," Harry said. "The speaking stone, he wasn't hiding it. He was just keeping it." Harry thought about the headmaster's desk, the warm black stone, the casual placement of something extraordinary in plain sight. He thought about 30 years and the specific kind of arrogance that wasn't malicious, the arrogance of a man who believed so completely in his own judgment that he stopped questioning whether possession required permission. "The other 2, he said. "The Gringotts vault," Hermione said. "The one you didn't recognize through the codex. I cross-referenced the vault number against the Gringotts registry, which Ragnarok gave us access to last week." She turned the page. "It's Dumbledore's personal vault." Another silence. "Both remaining artifacts," Harry said. "In Dumbledore's vault. Hufflepuff's Patience Stone and Ravenclaw's Wind Bell," she said. "The vault registration shows 2 objects matching their descriptions, logged approximately 40 years ago." She met his eyes. He wasn't scattering everything. He kept some of them. Harry was quiet for a moment. Then he stood up, straightened his robes, and said, "Right." "Right?" Ron said. "I'm going to see him this morning. Before classes." "Is that, how are you feeling?" Hermione asked. "Clear," Harry said. "I'm feeling clear." Dumbledore was in his office when Harry arrived, and this time he didn't need a password or a staircase. The gargoyle simply stepped aside, which meant Dumbledore had permanent access keyed to him now, had done it at some point in the past week without mentioning it, and Harry wasn't sure whether that was a gesture of welcome or another form of management, and he climbed the stairs deciding it didn't matter right now. He sat in the chair across from the desk. He looked at the black stone sitting beside a stack of papers on Dumbledore's left. "The speaking stone," he said. Dumbledore looked at the stone. Then at Harry. "Yes. It wasn't on the list you gave me." "No." "And the vault," Harry said. "Hufflepuff's Patience Stone and Ravenclaw's Wind Bell. Both in your personal vault since approximately the 1950s. A pause. Yes. Harry held his gaze and waited. Dumbledore looked older this morning than he had on Monday, and Harry thought that wasn't theatrics. The weight of the week had been real, the accumulation of each artifact recovered, each hiding place exposed, each layer of the structure dismantled from the outside in. He'd been watching his 30-year architecture come down piece by piece and had not tried to stop it, which was its own kind of courage, and Harry recognized it as such. The vault items, Dumbledore said finally, I want to be honest with you. I kept them because they were extraordinary, and because I told myself that someone should understand them while the heir was too young to. That was, not the right reason. I knew it wasn't, I simply chose not to examine it. He looked at his hands. The speaking stone I kept because it allows its holder to understand any language, spoken, written, or intended. I have used it, over 40 years, to communicate with magical creatures, to read documents in dead languages, he stopped. It became, gradually, something I depended on. Which is a precise description of how the wrong possession becomes normal to oneself. I need all three, Harry said. Yes. Dumbledore looked at the speaking stone. He picked it up, turned it in his fingers once with the specific gesture of someone saying goodbye to something, and placed it on the desk's edge closest to Harry. The vault items, I'll send instructions to Gringotts today. They'll be transferred to your vault by this afternoon. Harry picked up the speaking stone. It was warm, a different warmth from the other artifacts, more like a held hand than a compass or a glow. He held it for a moment, feeling the deep familiar recognition, and then he placed it with the others in the cloth in his bag. 21. 2 to go. He stood. The Wizengamot filing, Dumbledore said. You said within the week. Tomorrow, Harry said. Ragnarok has the paperwork ready. The heir claim goes in tomorrow morning, and the hearing is scheduled for, he checked what he knew. Monday week. The Wizengamot has a mandatory fast-track provision for heir claim hearings. Ragnarok invoked it. Dumbledore absorbed this. The governance provisions that trigger, he said carefully. The school's founding charter authority, the Wizengamot hereditary seat, these are significant changes, Harry. The wizarding world is not accustomed to this kind of structural shift. I know, Harry said. That's all right. Is it? Harry looked at him. I'm not doing it to break things. I'm doing it because it's true, and true things should be visible. He paused. Whatever changes are uncomfortable because they should have been this way for a long time. That's not my fault. I can't make it less uncomfortable by waiting longer. He met Dumbledore's eyes. You of all people should understand that eventually the right thing stops being optional. A long quiet. Yes, Dumbledore said. I do understand that. A pause, and then, with the straightforwardness of a man who has stopped pretending, I'll be at the hearing. I know, Harry said. He went down the stairs. The last two were easy, which felt right. He collected Hufflepuff's Patience Stone and Ravenclaw's Wind Bell from his Gringotts vault that afternoon. They arrived as Dumbledore had promised, transferred cleanly, sitting in the velvet-lined case that Ragnarok had prepared for the complete set. 22 objects, arranged by Founder in the case, their collective warmth a specific and layered thing, the 4 colors of the heritage scan visible faintly in each of them when he looked, the deep red gold of Gryffindor, the rich blue of Ravenclaw, the bronze of Hufflepuff, the silver of Slytherin, all present in varying emphasis across all 22. 22. 1 to go. The translation lens, Harry said. In the library reference section, Hermione said. On the shelf between the Gothic translation guide and the Ogham alphabet index. She paused. Where I leave it when I'm done using it. Because I use it regularly. Because it's been there for 60 years and everyone treats it as a library tool. Another pause. I may need a moment. Take your moment, Harry said. I'm fine, she said. It's fine. It's an extraordinary magical artifact and it's been a library tool and I've been using it for research and that's perfectly fine. She closed her notebook. Let's go get it. They went to the library. Hermione walked directly to the reference shelf, reached between the Gothic translation guide and the Ogham alphabet index, and picked up a magnifying glass with a frame of dark wood and a lens that, when you looked through it, sharpened not just text but meaning, not translation in the mechanical sense but the deeper translation of intention, of what a thing was meant to mean by whoever made it. She held it for a moment. Then she handed it to Harry. The circuit closed completely. 23. Harry held the translation lens and felt every other artifact respond simultaneously, not loudly, not dramatically, just the quiet completion of a set, the feeling of all 23 objects recognizing each other and the hands that held them and settling into that recognition with the deep satisfaction of things that have been waiting and are now at rest. The library was quiet around them in the late afternoon light. Ron was grinning. Hermione was not crying but was doing something in the vicinity of it that she managed through the forcible application of composure. Harry held the translation lens and looked through it at the shelf in front of him, and the Gothic translation guide's title resolved into its full original meaning, not just the translated words but the author's intent, the feeling of the thing, the particular precision with which someone had once tried to make a dead language accessible, and it was, for that moment, the most beautiful thing he'd read. He put the lens in the velvet case with the others. 23 artifacts. All home. The Wisingamot heir claim was filed the next morning. The filing was not, in itself, a public event. It was a document submitted to the Wisingamot's records office. Ragnarok had done it in person, as Harry's authorized representative, with the full documentation package, the heritage scan certification, the provenance chain for all 23 artifacts, the recovery record showing each item's retrieval, and the final heir confirmation signed by both Ragnarok and, in a development that had surprised Harry somewhat, by Dumbledore, who had added his own signature as Hogwarts headmaster confirming the heir's identity without being asked. Harry had read the signature on the document and felt something that wasn't surprise so much as the recognition that Dumbledore was doing the right thing when it was still voluntary, before the hearing made it mandatory. That was worth acknowledging. The hearing was scheduled for the Monday of the following week, 9 in the morning, in the Wisingamot's full chamber. In the 5 days between filing and hearing, 2 things happened. The first was that the wizarding world found out. Not through any deliberate announcement, but a Gringotts filing of this magnitude, with the specific language of an heir claim and the specific names of the founders, was technically a public record. Someone read it. Someone told someone. The Daily Prophet had a story by Sunday evening that was, by the Prophet's usual standards, remarkably accurate. Boy who lived claims founder inheritance, ancient charter invoked. The story ran with a photograph of Gringotts' main entrance and a subheading that read sources confirm, Harry Potter is heir to all 4 Hogwarts founders. By Sunday night the story had been reprinted in 4 other wizarding publications and old around Britain in sufficient volume that the Hogwarts Owlery was overwhelmed and Madam Hooch had to request additional owls from the Hogsmeade Post. The second thing that happened was Draco Malfoy. Harry had been waiting for it, in a peripheral way, the awareness that Draco was Lucius Malfoy's son and that Lucius knew about the claim, and that Draco's particular brand of social intelligence would have connected these dots within hours of the Prophet story. He'd expected something combative. He'd expected public posturing, loud commentary in the corridors, the Malfoy family's reflexive performance of superiority. What he got instead was Draco appearing at the Gryffindor table at breakfast on Sunday morning and standing there until Harry looked up. My father said to tell you that the Malfoy family intends to be represented at the hearing, Draco said. The performance wasn't there. He was delivering a message with the carefully controlled composure of someone who had been told exactly what to say. And that the family's position is, a slight pause, as if the words were less comfortable than he'd expected. Supportive. Harry looked at him for a moment. Thank you, he said. Draco looked like he had several things he wanted to say about this situation, none of which he'd been authorized to say. He nodded, once, with the stiff formality of someone executing a diplomatic mission under protest, and went back to the Slytherin table. Ron watched him go. Did Draco Malfoy was that cooperation? Practical recalibration, Harry said. It runs in the family, apparently. Hermione was already writing something. We need to prepare your statement for the hearing, she said. It needs to be exactly right, clear on the legal basis, clear on the recovery, specific about the governance provisions you intend to invoke without being threatening, Harry said. I was going to say exhaustive, she said, but threatening is also correct. You want the Wisengamot to understand that you're not there to dismantle everything, you're there to establish what's yours and set the terms for what comes next. Show don't tell, Ron said. Like that thing you did in the auction room. Exactly, Harry said. You walked in and you were just, very clear about what was true, Ron said. And people believed it because you believed it. Harry looked at him. Ron shrugged with the self-deprecating ease of someone who is occasionally more perceptive than he gives himself credit for and has decided not to make a thing of it. Statement, Harry said to Hermione. Let's write it. Monday. The Wisengamot chamber was underground, accessed through a lift in the ministry building, and Harry had only seen it once before, the fragment of a memory, a dream vision, blue light and stone seats and the feeling of judgment. Walking into it now, with the full velvet case under one arm and the heir certification in his pocket and Ron and Hermione behind him and Ragnarok at his side, was a different experience. The chamber was full. He had not expected that. Full capacity, all seated positions occupied, the Wisengamot's 50 full members in their plum and gold robes, arranged in the tiered stone seats. The public gallery above them packed with witches and wizards who'd clearly arrived early. Harry recognized ministry officials, several Hogwarts staff members, faces from the Prophet photographs. Dumbledore was there, seated in the gallery rather than the chamber proper, in plain blue robes, watching with an expression that was composed and quiet. Malfoy was there too, Lucius, in expensive black, seated in the gallery with the particular quality of a man who has positioned himself carefully in a room. And, in the lowest tier of the Wisengamot seats, the chief warlock's chair, sat Cornelius Fudge, who looked like a man trying to decide whether this situation was an opportunity or a threat and who had not yet resolved the question. Harry walked to the center of the chamber floor. The chair that normally held the accused or the examined was there, iron, imposing, fitted with chains that no one had invoked but that sat visible as an institutional memory. Harry didn't sit in it. He stood beside it. Fudge cleared his throat. The Wisengamot is called to session for a Founder's Heir Claim hearing, filed under the Charter of 974. The claimant is, he consulted his parchment, with the expression of a man reading something still slightly surreal. Harry James Potter. The claim has been certified by Director Ragnarok of Gringotts Wizarding Bank, witnessed by Albus Dumbledore, and is supported by a heritage scan record and a full recovery inventory of 23 Founders' artifacts. A pause. Mr. Potter, do you wish to address the chamber? Yes, Harry said. He looked around the chamber. At 50 Wisengamot members, at the packed gallery, at Dumbledore in his plain blue robes and Malfoy in his expensive black and the dozens of faces that were all doing what faces do when they're watching something happen that they're not sure how to feel about. He'd written a statement with Hermione. He'd memorized it. It was precise and clear and legally appropriate. He left it in his pocket. 3 weeks ago, he said, I went to Gringotts about my vault. I didn't know what they'd found. I didn't know what I was. I went because a letter said there was an irregularity, and I thought that meant something financial. He paused. What I found was that my family's vault had been systematically stripped of 23 artifacts over the course of a century, by people who knew what the artifacts were, who knew what I might be, and who decided, for various reasons, that a 12-year-old heir with this kind of claim was inconvenient. He held the chamber's attention with the ease of someone who isn't performing confidence but simply has it. I don't think most of those people were malicious. I think they were afraid of what an heir like this meant, afraid of the instability, the change, the shifting of arrangements that have been comfortable for a long time. Another pause. I understand that. Change is frightening. What's been stable for 30 years feels like safety even when it isn't. The chamber was very quiet. I'm not here to destabilize anything, Harry said. I'm here because 23 artifacts belong to my family and I've recovered them, and the law, the oldest law in British magical society, says that the heir of all 4 founders has standing in this chamber and authority over the governance of the school that the founders built. He reached into his bag and produced the velvet case. He didn't open it, he simply set it on the floor beside the iron chair. All 23. Recovered. Every one of them. He looked at Fudge. I'm not asking the Wizengamot to give me anything. I'm asking it to acknowledge what already exists. He let that sit for 5 full seconds. Then he sat down in the iron chair, not because anyone had directed him there, but because it was the obvious place to be, and he was done standing to the side of things. Fudge looked at his parchment. At Ragnarok, seated at Harry's left. At the chamber's members. He was recalculating, visibly, the man who had not yet resolved whether this was opportunity or threat, and Harry watched him come to a resolution in real time. The documentation, Fudge said, and his voice had shifted, cautious, yes, but engaged, the voice of a politician who has sensed the direction of a current. Director Ragnarok, can the bank confirm the heritage scan results? Ragnarok stood. The ancient heritage scan, conducted on the 12th of September, confirmed the convergent blood inheritance of all 4 founders' lines in Harry James Potter. The results are unambiguous. The bank certifies them without qualification. And the artifacts? All 23 founders' artifacts identified in the heritage inventory have been recovered and are present in this chamber. A pause. The bank also certifies the provenance chain for each item's original removal from the Potter vault, including the names of individuals responsible for unauthorized withdrawals and transfers, which are available to the Wizengamot upon request. The chamber absorbed this. Harry didn't look at the gallery, but he felt the quality of attention above him shift, the way attention shifts in a large room when something potentially explosive is mentioned. Those names, said a Wizengamot member in the second tier, a witch with iron-gray hair and the kind of face that had spent 40 years not being surprised by anything. Are they part of the claim record? They are part of the Gringotts audit record, Ragnarok said. They are available but not part of the active claim. The heir has chosen to file the claim without pursuing recovery charges against individuals who cooperated with the return of the artifacts. He looked at Harry, and something in the look carried a goblin's version of approval. That is the heir's prerogative. The iron-gray witch looked at Harry. That's generous, young man. It's practical, Harry said. I want the artifacts. I have them. Prosecuting everyone involved in a century of complicated history would take years and produce enemies I don't need. He held her gaze. I'd rather spend that energy on what the artifacts are actually for. And what is that? She said. Harry thought about it. About the compass of true north and the seed stone and the mirror of thought and the codex and the speaking stone and the translation lens and all 23 together in the velvet case on the floor beside him, 1,000 years of 4 extraordinary people's best work, waiting. Understanding them, he said. Preserving them. Using what they teach. He paused. The founders built Hogwarts because they thought magic deserved a place where it was taken seriously, studied properly, used well. These artifacts are the physical expression of that belief. Having them back doesn't mean locking them in a vault. He looked around the chamber. It means they can be what they were always supposed to be. The chamber was quiet. Fudge looked at his parchment one more time, with the expression of a man who has made a calculation and is going to commit to it. The Wizengamot will vote on recognition of the heir claim, he said. As presented, the claim acknowledges Harry James Potter as the confirmed convergent heir of all 4 Hogwarts founders, with all hereditary rights, standings, and authorities pertaining thereto under the Charter of 974 and the school's founding charter. He looked at the chamber. Members will indicate. Harry watched the hands go up. Not unanimous, there were 4 dissents in the back tier, members with the specific body language of people who have benefited from existing arrangements and are not rushing to change them. But the rest went up steadily, one by one, and then in groups, and when the count was complete the chief warlock's clerk wrote it down and read it aloud. 46 in favor. 4 against. The heir claim is recognized. The gallery erupted. Not applause exactly, the Wisengamot chamber wasn't that kind of room, but the sound of 50 people in a public gallery simultaneously exhaling and beginning to speak, the low roar of a crowd that has witnessed something significant and is processing it in real time, voices overlapping, the rush of it filling the stone chamber with human noise. Harry sat in the iron chair and let it happen. He looked up at the gallery and found Dumbledore, who was watching him with an expression that was many things simultaneously: pride, loss, relief, the particular sadness of a man who has held something too long and feels the absence of its weight as both grief and freedom. He didn't look away when Harry found him. He held the look, and after a moment he inclined his head, not deferentially, not submissively, but with the specific acknowledgement of someone saying yes, this, exactly this, even though it cost something. Harry gave him a small nod in return. Then he looked at Ragnarok, who was standing with his hands clasped and his expression carrying what Harry had come to recognize as the Goblin Nation's version of deep satisfaction, not triumphant, not loud, just the settled rightness of someone watching a 100-year ledger balance. "Director," Harry said quietly. "Mr. Potter," Ragnarok said. His eyes held the chamber's recognition, the velvet case on the floor, and then came back to Harry. "Well done. We did it together," Harry said. Ragnarok looked at him with slight surprise, and then the satisfaction deepened, and he said, "Yes. We did." The governance provisions took effect automatically on recognition. Ragnarok had explained this. The moment the heir claim was recognized, the founding charter's provisions activated without requiring further action. The school's hereditary authority, dormant for 1,000 years, acknowledged its heir. Harry would need to engage with what that meant gradually, carefully, in conversation with the school's existing administration, but it was real and it was law and it was no longer in question. The Wisengamot hereditary seat was more complicated, a minor aged out of full participation, but the seat was reserved, formally logged, awaiting his majority. His legal standing in Wisengamot proceedings was acknowledged from today. He couldn't vote yet. But he could speak, and he'd already demonstrated that speaking was sufficient. Cornelius Fudge shook his hand after the session, with the warm professional pressure of a politician in the presence of something he's decided is an asset rather than a liability. "Remarkable thing, Mr. Potter. Remarkable." His eyes were doing the calculation they'd been doing since Harry walked in. "We'll need to discuss the school governance provisions. When you're," he glanced at Harry's age. "When you're ready, of course." "Of course," Harry said pleasantly. Lucius Malfoy shook his hand next, and this handshake was different, drier, more formal, the handshake of a man honoring a commitment he made in a drawing room 3 weeks ago. "As I said," Malfoy said. "Practical," Harry said. Something moved at the edge of Malfoy's expression. "Quite," he said. McGonagall found him near the chamber exit, and her handshake had none of the calculation of the others. It was firm and warm and she held his hand a moment longer than was strictly required and looked at him with the expression that she wore when she was feeling things she considered it unprofessional to say aloud. "Well," she said. "Well," he agreed. "Your parents," she said, "would have," she stopped herself. Collected herself. "You did this properly, Harry. Thoroughly and properly." A pause. "Which frankly surprised me somewhat." "Hermione helped," Harry said. McGonagall looked at Hermione, who was standing behind Harry with her notebook and her expression of barely contained triumph. "Yes," McGonagall said. "I imagine she did. A beat. 10 points to Gryffindor, Miss Granger. For thorough research under unusual conditions." Hermione went slightly pink. "Thank you, Professor." "And 10 to you," McGonagall said to Harry. "For," she considered. "For knowing when to ask for help and when not to. That's a skill many people never develop." She walked away with the decisive stride of a woman who has attended an extraordinary session of the Waisengamot and intends to think about it at length in private. Harry watched her go. They took the lift up from the chamber and walked through the atrium, and the atrium was different from how it had been on Thursday when Harry had walked through it toward the lift to level 6, not in any physical way but in the way that places feel different when you are different in them. The fountain with its golden figures, the tile floor, the purposeful traffic of ministry employees, all the same. Harry walked through it and felt, for the first time in a long time, an absence of the slight diminishment that public spaces sometimes had, the quality of being the person that things happened to rather than the person who moved through the world as himself. He moved through the atrium as himself. It was a small thing and a large thing simultaneously. Ron was on his left, Hermione on his right, the velvet case under his arm. They went through the phone box and up into London, into the grey October afternoon, and stood on the pavement outside while the city went on around them, entirely unaware. 23, Ron said. 23, Harry confirmed. And a Waisengamot seat, Ron said. Reserved, Harry said. Until I'm of age. And school governance authority. That needs to be worked out properly, Harry said. It's not going to mean I run the school. It means I have standing and the right to be heard. Which is, he thought about it. Enough for now. Hermione had her notebook open. She was writing something rapidly, almost certainly the immediate next steps, the follow-up actions, the list of governance provisions to read, conversations to have, letters to write. She'd been managing in real time since the session ended and she would probably continue to do so for the next several hours, and Harry found this, as always, both admirable and slightly exhausting to witness. Hermione, he said. Yes, she said, still writing. Stop for a minute. She looked up. We did it, he said. Take a minute. She looked at him. Then she looked at Ron. Then she looked at the notebook in her hands, the pen poised above a half-written line, and she clicked the pen closed and put it in her pocket. 1 minute, she said. 1 minute, Harry agreed. They stood on the pavement in October London while black taxis went past and pigeons did pigeon things on the nearby steps and the city made its enormous indifferent noise around them, and Harry felt the weight of 23 artifacts in the velvet case and the air certification in his pocket and the Waisengamot recognition that was now formally part of the public record and the particular, clean satisfaction of something done properly all the way through. He thought about the Gringotts basin and the 4 colors of light. He thought about the compass of true north in the keeper's hold, waiting in the dark for someone with the right blood. He thought about Vienna and the ministry-level corridor and Malfoy Manor and Dumbledore's office and Cassius Vane's frightened eyes and Ragnar's rare, genuine smile. He thought about his parents, briefly, the version of them he knew from photographs and other people's memories, young and vivid and gone. He thought about what his father's vault had been supposed to give him, what had been taken from it before he was old enough to know it existed. He thought about the ledger, the first time he'd read it across a table at Florian Fortescue's while Hermione made notes and the summer alley moved around them and everything was just beginning to become clear. He thought about how it had felt, each time, each artifact, each recovery, the warmth and the recognition and the small, layered completion. 23 times that feeling, the thing that had been scattered finding its way back. Not just to a vault. To hands that knew it. Ron's minute elapsed. He said, right. What's for dinner? Hermione opened her notebook again. Harry laughed. They went through the phone box, down the lift, back to the ministry's atrium flow connection, and through the network to the 3 broomsticks, and from there up the road to Hogwarts in the long October afternoon, and the castle was ahead of them, enormous and old and full of history, and for the first time since he'd arrived at 11 years old with an owl and a trunk and no idea what he was walking into, Harry looked at it and felt completely, straightforwardly at home. Not because it was comfortable. Not because it was easy. Because it was his. All 4 founders had built it, and all 4 of them lived in his blood, and whatever that meant, whatever came next with the governance provisions and the Waisengamot seat and the 23 artifacts and the long unwinding of 100 years of managed inheritance, it was going to be figured out by him, with his friends, on his own terms, at his own pace. Not waited for. Not managed. Not behind the information. Just, his. He went up the road and through the gates and into the warm torchlit certainty of the only place he'd ever called home with both halves of himself, and it recognized him, the way it had always recognized him, the way old things recognize what belongs to them. He recognized it back.